Hello.
Hello.
Mayor, Council, we have gone live. We can wait for Allison to just, the video is on.
Cheers,
Okay, so I have to start watching what I say already?
Yeah.
Ah, there she is.
Oh, it's besides the four, it's the other, the logs don't matter.
Yep. Just get in.
I can put it, I can put it down this way, I should have a lot of space here.
Okie dokie, I'll follow me over to that. So what have we got with the, happening with the agenda? Tyler?
We are going to remove item 7.1.
7.1 is out.
It will be postponed to the September 24th meeting.
Okay.
That's second 7.1.
Okay, anything else?
There is one on table that's supporting a public comment speaker today.
Okay.
A letter from Mr. Johnston.
Okie dokie.
That's all.
Okay, motion to approve agenda, seconded, all in favor? And that is passed. So, public comments, what have we got?
Don Youngson, first today.
How many do we have?
We have two.
Okay. Hi, Don.
Good afternoon, everyone. Has everybody had a good summer?
Fabulous.
Eager to be back.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Reason I'm here, it's regarding the community land workshop and the rezoning of Lot 1. I had a chance to read the official or final document a short time ago, and compare that with what staff had provided earlier to council. And there's similar information in them, but not the context of which the final report put the information in. What concerns me was that, in my note that I referred to, there was no support at all given from any of the tables during the workshop for any kind of industrial zoning on the community lands, including light industrial for Lot 1. There was mention of it, but it was felt not to be something to be any of the table considered worth considering for the municipal lands or community land. And this is from, as my note, my letter says, this is 50+ people in the community that were picked by senior members of council and some of the commission members. So with this in mind, I see on the agenda today, the last item is something talking about considering reading the third reading of the bylaw to rezone Lot 1 for a variety of things, including light industrial. And yet, this document, which was understood as being its decision on furthering the rezoning, was contingent on getting the results of the workshop report. And it's here. There hasn't been, so now that it's here, and I gather from looking at the agenda tonight, there's not going to be a committee of the whole to have this document presented to the public and discussed by members of the public and council. It's basically, the document is now here, and therefore the public has access to it and has seen it, just as I've seen it and read it once. And therefore, we're now can move along, the council can move along and consider a third reading. I don't quite see the due process here, but maybe I misunderstand things. So I'm just asking that during this evening's council meeting, we can get a clear understanding of why there isn't the information that's within this document does not support the rezoning of light industrial, and why is it not going to influence that? And it's going to come out that this report says enough just to forego the third reading, or postpone it.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Anton Raven?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Can I speak to the development variance permits, DVP 042118 right now, or do it later when it's coming up?
Right now.
This is the one that has
This
been
is the
pulled
one.
pulled from our agenda? Is this the?
Yes,
Sorry.
it is.
It's the one that has been pulled from the agenda
Been pulled?
and is, this is, sorry, where are we here? We pulled one of them.
What's the number on it?
7.1?
We
Yes.
pulled 7.1, which is 1225 Scarborough Road. Is that the
That's
one you
right,
want to
that's
speak to? Okay, so it's up to you. However, we won't be talking about it tonight. It will be coming up at the next meeting on the 24th.
Okay, then I'll rather do it then, so it's
Okay.
more.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anton. Sorry about that. We didn't know until right now that it was
Okay.
being pulled.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it for public comments.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Maureen has asked that 3.7 be pulled, and so that is going to be on at the end. Anything else? Yes.
315.
315. Paving tenant, okay. And anything, Mike?
15.2 under the call.
15.2.
What?
Request for larger clearing. Always a fun topic.
Hang on, is that in the consent agenda?
That's in the information items.
Information
Information
items.
items at the end.
Okay. Now I get it.
Okay, and anything else?
Do we need to pull the housing reserve fund bylaw?
Raj?
I don't think we need to pull it unless we want to discuss it.
Or didn't we make a change to the wording?
No, oh, actually, I don't think I made the changes to the wording on that.
So then maybe we should discuss it in an open council
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay. Is it something you would like to?
Yeah, so we better,
Okay.
And that's, which one?
3.19.
3.19. Okay. Anything else?
Hang on, 3.19
Or
is...
3.9, sorry.
3.9.
Oh,
Okay.
3.9. Oh, okay. Okay. And anything else? Okay.
I'm trying to find it. Yeah, 3.6.
Hold 3.6 as well? Oh, yeah. Okay. And anything else? Okay, motion to adopt consent agenda, seconded, all in favor, and that is passed unanimously, I trust, Michael?
Indeed.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, hey, we have a delegation. Hi, Gary. Have a seat, join us.
We got 3 of us here, Shane, and 5. Anyway, we just like to, I'll just give you a piece of paper here. We'd like to try and get your guys' support to help move the
Thanks, sir.
log control back down to Griffin Park, Middlefield. you know, John Henry's.
Okay.
And, we're just not getting the crowds up there. Tom McComb, we've met with him, we've already applied to move him to have the show there next year, July 27th, 28th. And we'll decide, he said it would help if we had council support. And we've had Jordan Sturdy come out this year, and we're gonna try and see about putting poles in the ground down there, but the biggest problem with having it in Crippen Park, it has a lot of advantages, we'll get the tourists, but it's putting the poles and stuff like that in and out of the ground, but that's got nothing to do with your guys' as far as the logging show goes.
Right, okay.
But definitely, it's a great event for the community. You know, we try to give money back to the community from raising, from fundraisers and the event. Attendance was way down this year. Everybody complained it's too hot, too far to go. No parking, but there's lots of parking. We won't get into all the details about all the other guys in Squamish and Paul River that go to these logging shows with 3,000-4,000 people, and there ain't no tents.
Right.
But anyway, that's where we just like to move the logging show back down to Crippen Park and in the middle field.
Okay. Well, we have
And if we
here,
could get a letter from council, so that we can get that to Metro Vancouver, we're hoping for.
right, so there's a recommendation that council send a letter to Metro Vancouver Regional Parks expressing its support to the annual Logger Sports Show being held at Crippen Park. That would work for you?
Yeah.
You changed off to 2.
I
Do you need
didn't say a word. I mean, I didn't do anything.
When you read it out, you said 2.
Oh, sorry,
You meant off.
whatever it says.
Okay.
Misspoke. Can someone give me a motion on that?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and a second there? Okay, any discussion? Yes, Sue Ellen?
I'm wondering if we could save this vote until our Metro Vancouver rep is with us. Feels funny to be making a motion like this without Maureen here, and she'll just be like 10 minutes, right, until she's here. So that, because sits on the Metro Vancouver Parks Committee and that kind of thing, I just wondered if we might want to consider that. And secondly, I'm trying to remember, it seems to me that the pole, they haven't in the past allowed the poles to be planted, is that what?
Well, that's the cost that arises when you have to put them in the ground and pull them out after the event, and putting them in. Because if we didn't have Jim Clark and some of these other, like Frank C. really helping us all out, it's a huge expense to put the poles in the ground every time, and if we had to pull them out of the park and to get them out past Tuscany's Pizza is a nightmare, and if we're not gonna be down in the bottom field of the Bullfest field, because Tom, at this point, can't foresee that happening, but he said the middle field is quite possible, and it's big enough, and they'll get the tourists coming off from the mainland, and that would be a big help for the logging show. But if you go to Squamish, there's 4,000 people in the crowd. There's 4,000 in Power. I mean, it's not that people don't go and watch these things, but just,
Yeah, it takes a while to build it.
and it's just a lot of cost for the infrastructure to set all this stuff up, and then, you know, that's why the other places not work. And the poles are up at our park now, and that's a huge amount at the Veterans Field, but we're just not getting the crowd, so like, the only hassle now is just gonna be a cost of doing business, to put the poles in the ground, and take them back over. That's what it takes,
No, fair enough. I don't know, procedurally, Allison, you would...
Well, I guess the only thing would be if Metro looked at the minutes, it would probably be better to have all
Sure.
7 of us, especially Maureen, voting in favor of the resolution.
Okay, do you want to just defer that then until Maureen arrives?
Yeah.
No problem.
Is there any chance we could couple it with a, let me just bring up our agenda.
You guys can still vote when Green's not here, and then just wait for a last decision.
Item 7.2, because we're talking about Veterans Park then. And
Oh.
Here's Maureen.
Oh, perfect.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
Yes.
We're at delegations, agenda item 4.1.
My apologies.
No worries.
Barry is,
Mr. Anderson has asked us for support to write a letter to Metro Vancouver supporting the middle field down near the Bullfest grounds for Logger Sports, and we have a recommendation in the agenda that we have moved and seconded and are now chatting about. But we wanted you to be here since you're, so important to this whole thing.
Well, it was my suggestion,
Because-
because you were the Metro Vancouver rep.
Because you're on Metro. before we call the question, so just, you have 10, 15 seconds to get acclimated.
I think that Gary is making this request to council at exactly the right time. There will be turnover in the Metro Parks Committee, and there's plenty of time for discussion prior to next summer's lobby sports. I don't know what the outcome will be, but it's worth asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so can I call the question? All in favor? And that is passed unanimously.
Hey,
So we will get our letter drafted and sent off where you serve.
Thank you very much. And then I'll get, so Tom will get wind of it somehow down the chain.
You betcha.
Oh, yeah, in the reports.
It's a big chain that big, that's
Yeah, you got that.
It's a long
Thank you
chain.
very much.
Eventually gets there.
Hey, Gary, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Gary. And Gary, we'll send you a copy, the copy you wanted, so that
Okay,
you have it too.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
we'll see you at the show next year, maybe the municipality might even sponsor an event.
Maybe.
You never know with the new council.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, so we're now entitled to CC with Gary and have, I don't know, Sophie draft a letter?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Nicholson, Community Lands Report Workshop.
Yes, thank you. So I'm pleased to introduce the Community Lands Bowen Island Workshop report to council. The report's been available since about the 17th of August. It was posted at that time on the municipal website, and it's included, obviously, in our current agenda. And just by way of introduction, I wanted to remind council what the purpose of the workshop was. And if you look on the first numbered page, the objectives for the workshop were to provide public input into the future of the community lands, to enhance awareness and education on the development of the community lands, to provide council with some guiding principles for moving forward on the lands, and to understand through the collection of stories how islanders feel about the future of community lands. And as the report, I think, illustrates, there were 53 islanders in attendance, and it was a very lively and engaging day. The majority of council was in attendance at the workshop as well. The intended use of the document is outlined on page 27 of the report, and there is a call for feedback from the public and an accompanying web input form on the community lands part of the website. So the intended uses of the report were to share with the broader community the workshop experience, and for that we relied quite a lot on the visual material that Karina Keeling produced, and the bulk of that is included. As a springboard for an updated or new official community plan, there's quite a lot of feedback here that might be useful. As a tool for municipal planning and development, as a resource for municipal committees, and as a foundation for further work on specific issues, including housing and transportation. There's additional information at the community lands part of the website. What this was not intended to be was strong, specific feedback on the parallel process of the lot line rezoning. And there is some material in here that relates to that, but that was included in Daniel's report at our last council meeting. I think it's readable. I wondered if council had any questions or concerns that I might be able to answer or that we want to talk about. Alison?
I was a bit surprised when I saw the agenda on Friday. I realized that we weren't breaking into a committee of the whole to have an actual presentation of the report to us, which I guess I was expecting.
Yeah, the facilitators, in a meeting that occurred afterwards, the facilitators of the session indicated that they did not want to do that. They wanted the document to be available. They didn't want to be preparing a PowerPoint. And they felt that this was a document that would largely inform future planning.
Yeah. Any other points of discussion? Okay. Yes, Gary?
Yeah, just, and I can't seem to find this, I was there, I thought I was there right at the beginning. I was certainly there for Marie's presentation and Chris's. Was at any point, did anybody notice, and I thought we were gonna take the community center lands, what's decided for, well, what's been sort of used for the community center, and the fire hall lands, I thought that was gonna be off the table. But there was quite a bit of reference to that, and there's a lot of energy went into saying that that's not the right place for them, and I don't know whether that was superseded by what was said, or did the message not get it?
It wasn't superseded by what was said. What was said was that there were a number of elements in this that were established, and the community center, the health center, and the fire hall. The sites for those three capital projects were identified as don't mess with them, but people did.
Okay. I just didn't know if that actually got out there, or whether people were that intent on it that they wanted to change it that much.
I think it was that intent,
Yeah.
because I certainly raised the issue with people during the,
Yeah.
and pretty plain on the opening remarks, that this was
Off
the
the table.
intent.
Should know.
And it was, well, that's what I came here to tell you.
Yeah.
Was kind of the response. So,
all right, thank you.
I don't know what you want to hear, but this is what I want to say.
Yeah.
I think, these were strong people.
Oh, I understood. Yeah. Great crowd.
There weren't a lot of wimps in that crowd.
No.
I don't think there were any.
Yeah.
Sue Ellen.
I just want to compliment the group on the report. To me,
Yeah,
it was, it reflects the experience that I had there on the day. And I appreciated especially reading the storytelling part of the report at the end, where of course we ended up with writing a narrative, right? And so that's what I turned to first to find out, well, what came out of there. And I appreciated having what we heard sections at the end from the different organizers and things like that. So thank you.
Pass that on to the larger group.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry.
So, as to the comments raised about moving the fire hall, I just want to remind everybody that when the rezoning was done, we had provided information that had been provided to us by the Fire Underwriters Survey, and work they did on what was called a GIS optimization analysis for the location of the main fire hall. And that optimum location on the GIS analysis was across the street from Sue Ellen's house.
Collins Farm,
Yeah.
in Kirkland Park, I guess.
Well, yeah, in the Miller Road, Collins Farm area. So the location that the two locations we were looking at that time was up behind the school on Lot 2 and where we are on Lot 3. And we chose Lot 3 because it was flat and more easily accessible. So that recommendation for that location is land that we own, which is the closest to the optimization analysis done by the Fire Underwriters Survey.
Okay. Do you need a motion to receive? We do that?
Yes, it's in there.
I'll move it. That council received the report titled The Community Lands of Bowen Island Workshop Report dated September the 4th, 2018, and referred to staff and municipal committees for information.
Second.
Any discussion before I call the question? All in favor? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. And thank you a lot.
Yeah. Amazing.
Really.
Thanks.
Nobody believed that
Thanks
this
to
was
Chris.
really possible.
Thanks to Chris and to Chris Corrigan, to Edward Walkman, to John Reed, to yourself, to Dennis Wilson, to me, to David Hawking. That was me.
Fabulous. Great job.
Okay.
Oh, Daniel, of course, Daniel.
That's right. He's making up Daniel.
Yes.
Hi, Daniel, you're up next. Docks Across Beaches, second reading.
So I'm here today with for consideration of second reading of bylaw 466. So this is a bylaw to amend the WG1 zone, and so this is not readable in any sense, but the WG1 zone, the Water General 1 zone, is a zone that extends from the natural boundary 300 meters out with the vast majority of Bowen's coastline. So this little section by Cape Hard Curtis is in its own variation, and there's a couple spaces in Snug Cove, mainly for the marinas, that are not in the WG1 zone, but other than that, it's the majority of the Bowen's coastline. So again, we have a number of regulations in the WG1 zone relating to docks. So we have minimum setback, we have minimum setback for any portions of a dock, setback from where a dock can be from another dock, or setbacks where it can be from a property line projection of public beach access. And we have regulations about maximum size and maximum width and maximum length. And then at issue here is this current regulation that says any community dock, private mooring facility, group mooring facility shall be located such that it will not impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the foreshore. So in our island plan, this is the most recent island plan, 2018, priority A3 was to protect the shoreline, and so it talked about further work on dock regulation, steps to be taken to continue work on dock regulation by drafting a bylaw that maps where docks are permitted. And at that point, Council identified November 1st, 2018, bylaws have been updated to reflect greater protection for public beaches and the recreational foreshore. So that's in the background. So then in April of this year, Council instructed staff to begin preparation of a bylaw to amend our land use bylaw to prohibit dock construction across beaches, recreational foreshore, and adjacent to public accesses to the ocean. And then July 9th, staff brought bylaw 466 to Council, and Council read it the first time and directed staff to undertake referrals and report back to Council, so that's where we are today. So in terms of referrals, the next scheduled APC meeting is September 17th, so there was a July meeting that was canceled, and there's no August meeting, so the next APC meeting is September 17th, so staff will refer the bylaw to the APC and we'll report back to Council with the results of that referral. The Islands Trust Executive Committee commented, so they said that the bylaw 466 is not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. So then just some of the discussion, so staff looking at it, always notes are relevant OCP policies, so policy 76 in our OCP says private moorage and docks subject to the following, and the top point, private moorage will not impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the foreshore. Talks about some of their goals in there, but land use bylaw will set out detailed provisions related to siting, setback, size, configuration, with materials, and projections for private moorage. And then just further discussion, so at that July 9th meeting as well, Council had requested staff to provide comment on the ramifications of changing the wording in the bylaw from, so it currently said it not impact eelgrass meadows, and staff, or Council asked to look at changes to eelgrass habitat instead. So staff in looking at it looked at, there's an Islands Trust Fund report from 2018 that looked at the nearshore eelgrass inventory, and they talked about eelgrass habitat and eelgrass mapping. So they talked about key factor in determining eelgrass habitat is light availability, but it's subject to a number of other things, including ocean temperature, wave action, human disturbance, substratum. So staff looked at that, and so that's quite a, that might be quite a subjective thing in terms of what is potential eelgrass habitat. It could be a hard one to pin down. One thing staff identified, so the mapping done talked about meadows, but it talked about beds, it talked about the patches. So this is sort of an example. This is, I believe, Bowen Bay, so you can see it's identified, okay, there's beds in here, but there's also stars that are patches, and there's dots that are different things. And in the report, I pulled another section by Crayola Beach that again shows some areas there's beds, some areas there's patches. So suggested amendment, rather than changing the rest of meadows to eelgrass habitat, staff would say we want to pursue that amendment would be to say that it not negatively impact eelgrass meadows, beds, or patches in a way to capture sort of the presence of eelgrass, but not the potential of eelgrass habitat. The other just discussion piece in the report is I include a section just on beach definitions. So I know at the last council meeting there's some discussion about beaches. Do we want a definition or not? It's currently undefined, and generally when something's undefined, it's sort of staff do what's a generally acceptable definition when interpreting so I've included some there for sort of council reference. So then staff have brought back this reading, so to be to grant second reading and then for the application to a public hearing.
Okay. Questions for Daniel? Gary?
Well, I'm still stuck, and it's even more confusing now in my mind. There's two things. The policy 76 of the OCP, private mortgage will not impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the shoreline. And then in the next statement, or the one before that, it says physically divide a beach. The definition we had of physically dividing a beach was anywhere it goes across the beach, you cannot, even if you can walk underneath it, it can't go up. So which one is it? Can you put a dock in there that at high tide you can walk underneath on a public beach or beach, whatever your definition is, or can you not? Very simple.
In the current land use bylaw or in the proposed, you mean
Proposed.
under the proposed amendment? I mean, physically divide a beach, I would say, no, you can't put a dock across a beach.
Even if you can walk underneath it.
Yeah, so that would be the difference is that currently we talk about not impeding pedestrian access. Right, so currently in our land use bylaw, we would say, okay, you can go underneath, you have access. The amendment would.
But you've got two contrary statements. You've got one that says, well, it's right here. Any community dock, private mortgage facility, group facility located will not physically divide the beach, and then the next sentence is impede pedestrian access along the beach. So which one is it? I'm sorry, but I don't understand the difference here. Like, I can't understand why they're such contrary.
It's both. They're both.
Well, you can't have both.
Why not?
Well, because you can't have a dock, you can't have access underneath a dock that doesn't impede pedestrian traffic if you don't allow a dock to be there in the first place.
Right. So it becomes moot.
Well, then why don't you just take it out of there?
There's no dock there.
Yeah, so why don't you just take out, why don't you just take out the section that says impede pedestrian access across the beach portion of the foreshore, because it doesn't have any relevance anymore.
Well, if that's the actual wording of the bylaw, that's policy 76. Which are we talking about here?
Well, it's policy 76, but it's been left in the bylaw.
Well, policy 76 was put in by the OCP committee in 2010. Policy 76, that wording impede pedestrian access, as far as I can recall in my research, did not exist in the OCP until the 2010 OCP was done. When we did the amendments in 2014, we changed the wording to match the OCP so there would be no confusion, which is why one of the reasons why I'm totally against this. That OCP was done with a ton of public consultation, as we have heard many times at this council table. And so physically divide a beach, just what's wrong with the dock that you can walk underneath?
Okay, I'll go to Sue Ellen.
Okay, I just hope I can maybe provide some historical perspective here. Public access to a beach can be quite narrow. For example, at Pebbly Beach off Senator Road over here in Mannion Bay, the public access to the beach is only the width of that road that you walk down. And then you get to the high tide line, and as soon as you cross the high tide line, everything is public, right, both sides, unless somebody puts a beach up. So right now, people walk down that public beach access and they spread out along the beach to both sides as much as they want to. Some of them go into the rocks and stuff, but most people are along the beach. There have been, since 2001, there have been 3 dock applications to put in long, large beaches, docks, at Pebbly Beach. 2 of them in 2001 were overturned through public comment. The new municipality of the day took lots of comment from the public that said that they didn't want docks that divided the beach, because then they would have somewhere to throw their frisbee, they couldn't see the other people, they couldn't feel the full sense of exposure to the horizon and the weather and the sun, and the feeling of being at the edge at a beach, and the connection that people feel to the island from being at a beach. Because it's quite different being underneath a beach. So in 2009, under the previous definition, which was the same one as was going in here, that the, oh shoot, now I'm about the wrong page, but the one about dividing a beach. In 2009, council turned down a long dock that would have also divided the Pebbly Beach. And so without that kind of thinking, there could be 3 long docks along Pebbly Beach and crossing sort of into it. And only that narrow place where people could get down. So I think it would be quite a different beach user experience, quite a different recreational experience for the public to be there without that physically divide a beach. Shall not physically divide a beach part of the local rules. And so I think for us as council to protect Pebbly Beach and other ones like it, we should put that back. And since it's got a track record of protecting the beach and also not attracting any legal action that I'm aware of. And I think we, as a small island municipality, we don't have the public playing fields and all the other kinds of swimming pools and recreational infrastructure that other communities have to build. Instead, we have public foreshore, and it was really highly valued through the information input that we got through the public through our recent parks plan that we just passed, and that calls for protection of beaches. And I think we should put this valuable part about docks should not physically divide a beach back in. And I think we need the part about shall not impede pedestrian access, because that can be different. Sometimes that's a dock at the edge of what people think of or play on as a beach that stops people from cutting up on a path up into a neighborhood. And that could be quite different, or it could be, it doesn't have to mean walking under a beach. It could also mean getting to the beach or getting along a little piece of shoreline. For example, Pebbly Beach again, that's one that people also use that beach as a way to get to the ferry, coming down from Miller's Landing and from Seven Hills. So they come down there and they scoot across the beach and along down to the ferry that way, or to the trails in Killarney Lake. So these are just some of the things that previous committees and previous councils have dealt with, some of the experiences that have happened. If we want to picture Pebbly Beach with 3 long docks on it, that's one thing. But if we want to think about how the land use bylaw, with the language about shall not divide a public beach, has protected Pebbly Beach for over 10 years with no long lawsuits, and so that we have the Pebbly Beach that we've got today, which is one of the most popular beaches on Bowen at the moment, then I support the current bylaw, and I would be voting in favor.
Okay, I'm going to go to Melanie and then, sorry, Melanie and then Allison. Did you want to give me? No. Okay.
Daniel, just have a question. The recommended change of wording for D, negatively impact no grass meadows, beds, or patches, do you need a council resolution for that to be changed in the proposed bylaw?
Yes. Yeah, so my discussion about ingress meadows, if
Yeah.
council wants to change to include beds or patches, then that would be a council resolution.
I just wanted to say I'm really happy with the research that staff did on that subject, and I really thought with that change, it accomplishes what I was hoping we were trying to get at. So I would like to move a resolution, if that's possible, to change, to add the word beds or patches for item D. Do you need?
Second reading to the bylaw as
Just-
amended? It's amended by the...
No, you've got to write the amendment first.
Yeah, so we're looking for
And that's
resolution.
in the report, not on the cover page.
Okay, let's get this procedurally correct, first of all. So are you up on this one, Raj? What's our first motion?
Daniel's got it in his report
Sorry.
somewhere.
I'm sorry.
Which page, Dan?
Yeah, I've missed it.
I don't have a, so this is the proposed change. I don't believe that I put a.
I thought you put it in the discussion about Eelgrass Meadow.
It's in the discussion.
You
Yeah,
got
but
it.
it's not being put in the,
No, it's
in the
not in the
proposed-
agenda, so it's under, he's put it in his, not that I'm in support of it, but, Daniel has suggested that D have those words added to it. But before we add those, the Alps Trust report, does it actually talk about meadows at all, or does beds mean meadows?
It doesn't talk about, at least the mapping portion does not talk about meadows, but talks about beds.
And the discussion portion probably doesn't either then. I mean, the written part.
The sort of overview of it does talk about eelgrass meadows, but none of their mapping identified meadows.
So are there 3 categories then? That's what I'm getting
Yeah,
at, meadows,
right.
beds, and patches?
See, so they broke down eelgrass beds by flat continuous or flat patchy or fringing continuous or fringing patchy, and I don't know how that would relate to an eelgrass meadow or not. I'm not well versed enough.
I really felt that this really kind of found the happy medium between, I think there was a fear that if we went to habitat, it would rule out too much, and I think this kind of captures that in-between point where we've had actual presence of eelgrass, but it hasn't been enough, it's just been a patch, so I think this kind of is a happy medium between too little and too much, so.
So the motion could be something like that council request staff to, or require staff to add the words beds or patches after the words meadows in D.
That the bylaw be amended.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
To include the wording.
I'm just trying to get to the
Do
wording.
you- Sorry, I'll go to Maureen and then
Can I suggest?
to Dan.
Would
Yeah.
that, can I suggest, Melanie? So
Yeah.
the bylaw number 466, 2018, be amended to revise section 2D to read, negatively impact eelgrass meadows, beds or patches, and then a semicolon or, so it continues on. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's it.
So is that what you move?
That is what it
I second that.
Okay. Any
Thank you.
discussion on that amendment before I call the questions? The amendment to the bylaw? All in favor? Those opposed? Okay, so now I'll call the question on second reading of the bylaw itself. That bylaw number 466, 2018. That's the guy right there, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, the bylaw 466, 2018, cited as Bowen Island Municipal Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 460, 2018, be read a second time, and
As amended.
as amended, thank you. And that council refer bylaw number 466, 2018 to a public hearing. Can I have someone to move that and second it? Okay, any discussion before I call the question? Gary?
So now that we've determined that you're not going to be able to have a dock anywhere that divides public beach,
Right.
now you have to define public beach.
Well, it's not public.
No, well, that's in the report.
Well,
That's in the
not
report.
really. Daniel's saying that it's going to be very subjective, and if you put it in an application and put your dock in, they're going to say, well, you know, that's considered a beach, and you cannot divide that beach. So my point here, and in fairness, is that this is quite a radical bylaw to do with the foreshore and people's rights to use that foreshore if they happen to be property owners. If we take a Roger Curtis, for an example, the map showed that everywhere along that foreshore, that bylaw was, was in effect anywhere along that shoreline. So now, we don't have any idea where this bylaw is going to be in effect.
You know exactly where it's going to be in effect.
No, you don't.
Please
No.
explain.
Please explain.
The only fudge factor in this is absent a set definition, staff would determine the presence of a beach at time of referral and be making a recommendation to council based on a site visit of areas subject to the 10-year referral.
Perfect. Okay, so guy buys a house, he wants to put a dock out there, he applies to put a dock, and you say, no, you can't put it because the planning department says that it's beach.
Yes. And you
Okay,
probably
that's-
You knew that the minute that you bought the thing, if you've got your house behind a beach.
Well, no, because the definition of a beach isn't that, it's subjective.
It's not that tough to figure out.
Well, I'm afraid it is. And, you know, for that reason, of not putting that in there, I can't vote for this. Well, I wouldn't anyway,
Was
but
that
I know it to be
No.
true.
No,
I got that, that's
No,
in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to speak to the,
yeah, I'm sorry, but I think this bylaw has far-reaching consequences. You, I believe, Mayor, and the lawyer, you devised this bylaw in the main, substantially. There has been absolutely, and you, by the way, you did mention this to us in council. There was a brief discussion in council that you were doing this. Frankly, this is an island-wide bylaw, well, nearly, I said by war, and maybe I've got that right. And I think with remarkable implications. I just don't think it's being taken seriously enough if this goes through. Now, there has been little or no, we haven't had a committee of the whole, we've had no really public input or discussion. I haven't heard of any other parties being involved. So I suppose it's going to be left to the drama of a public hearing where people can really say what they think about such a wide-ranging bylaw of this type, which to me just looks like a thinly veiled or not so thinly veiled upon docks all around this island, and that's how it's going to be perceived. So really, could we not think this out more thoroughly and again? Because I think it's ill-advised, I think it's ill thought out, and it hasn't required the amount of input and preparation that should have been brought in even before the first reading. A lot of other people should have had their fingerprints on this for input, and with these sketchy definitions, are we in for yet another badly written bylaw? So I certainly do not support, I don't support this bylaw, and I don't support the spirit in which it's been introduced.
just before you jump in, Maureen, might I say, this was an election issue in the last election. This has been in 4 strategic plans. The essence of this bylaw amendment is reinstating words that were taken out by the last council. Right? So this is hardly something that was cooked up between myself and the lawyer. It's hardly something that has not had broad consultation in the community or that people are not aware of. All right? And the public hearing will be what it is. Right? We kind of put this off as long as we possibly could, Michael. Rubber had to hit the road some point.
Maybe if we'd had the required amount of consultation, it wouldn't have got to where it is now, because it would have been put back still further. And that's what it really hasn't had. And if it was that important and that much of a promise and that much of an election campaign promise, why wasn't it dealt with earlier? And why didn't more people have a chance to really, really think this through? Because that's what we haven't got, and that's what's going to show.
Okay, I'm going to have to limit debate pretty soon. Allison?
Was Maureen on the list?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Maureen first and then Allison. Sorry.
I'll be voting in support of this. I would like it to go to public hearing and for the public to have their opportunity to provide thoughtful feedback on the bylaw that's before them. When I was thinking back on what's come before this council in terms of dock applications, I believe that the majority of dock applications that have come to council have been approved. And is that correct, Daniel?
I believe so. I think the only ones that have been turned down are the ones that haven't done the biophysical exam.
Okay. I don't find the bylaw particularly sketchily written. The consultation, I think, has been protracted and varied, and we are still getting some feedback, but the feedback that we've received is relatively modest at this point. We've got the contrast between letting sleeping dogs lie or a concern about viewscapes. So we've got people who are still contributing to the discussion, and when it goes to public hearing, we will hear some more. So I look forward to hearing from the community in a public hearing, and it may be a difficult public hearing, but goodness knows we've had difficult public hearings in the past. Why should this be any different?
Okay, Allison?
Well, I think because this is such an island-wide issue, and I know, with a lot of rezonings, we request the applicant, which in this case is ourselves, to hold a public information meeting. So why are we not doing that with this? So I would move an amendment to the motion to add point 2 and renumber point 3, or to add that a public information meeting be held prior to the public hearing. Not immediately prior, but in the weeks prior to the public hearing.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? We do. Any discussion before I call for question on that? All those in favor of adding a public council?
Public information.
Public information.
Oh, public open house, what would you like to call it, Dan? Open house?
Open house.
Open
Open
house?
house.
That a public open house be held prior to the public hearing.
Okay, all those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, the amendment is defeated. Gary, you have one more short, brief?
Yeah, just very, very short. It would be interesting to go back, Maureen, your comment about the docks that were approved, and I think we probably approved 8 or 10. It would be nice to go back and see out of that 8 or 10, how many of them would be not approved under the new bylaw.
It would be.
Yes, it would.
Okay. And on that note, I'll call the question. All those in favor of proceeding with the second reading?
Why don't you read the proper motion?
We did. It's been moved and seconded. I'm calling the question on the motion, on the bylaw. Okay, all those in favor? And those opposed? Okay. And that is passed. Okay, moving right along. Emma is up with the Veterans Park.
Good afternoon, Mayor Council. Bringing an application for an OCP amendment and rezoning for Veterans Park, and this is just for introduction. We're talking about a parcel that is near the west south central area of the island, just off of Salal and the other end of Bishop's Hill, Callan Road. This piece of land was issued a temporary use permit in June of 2017. And the catalyst for this permit was the Loggers Sports Show, which we just heard about earlier today. That permit expires in June of 2019. It was issued for a period of 3 years. It does have an option to extend one time, but currently the zoning is for rural residential, and in June of this year, Council passed a resolution to investigate a rezoning for this parcel of land to allow for park uses and public works. This is the southern portion of the lot, and as you can see, quite a large bit of the southern part is currently used for the public works yard, and the smaller part right above it was designated for the outdoor assembly use. That was the logging show. This was a council resolution to look at a rezoning for this site. And the current OCP designation is actually the Cowan Point Comprehensive Development Area. This particular parcel was set aside for the intent of outdoor recreational use, playing fields, and school use. The land use bylaw zone is rural residential. And possible rezoning and OCP amendment would give this a park
designation with an industrial for the public works yard portion, and a zone of multi-use activity park and industrial medium to allow for the public works yard. That's the main summary. At this point, staff is recommending that council refer this application to the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee and the Advisory Planning Commission for further comment.
Do we know how big the works yard would be? How many acres?
I don't have that number on the top of my head.
Because it looks like it's at least a couple of acres.
It would be, yeah, this portion here, I think it would be over an acre, but I don't have the exact number.
Do you have a program that will give you that number?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a good number to have. It's quite a large area. Sue Ellen?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I think we also dealt with this in June 25th. We talked at our meeting and passed resolutions about the disc golf use. So that was, I think we said, council approved the disc golf course collaborative project services agreement for the preliminary design as attached to the report from Bonnie, and that the mayor execute and the chief administrative officer execute such an agreement. Anyway, so that kind of seems to me to be an approved use as well. I don't know if it fits in with your the recommendation that you had up there about current uses, but I think there's also trail in there as well, a section of trail. So because of all these things, and even if the logging show event itself does end up moving to another part of the island at some point, the possibility of practice ground or play field, or the different kinds of related park recreational uses, I support this idea, and I'm just hoping that you will check in with Bonnie and about the disc golf course and the trails and the other park kinds of uses. Okay, thank you.
Just to quickly point out, trail use is allowed on any parcel on Bowen Island, and the disc golf use, I believe, would be covered under the proposed park zoning.
I just didn't see a reference specifically to that, so.
So everything other than the works yard, that whole parcel would then be designated parkland? Okay. Everything. So it would be basically just pulling the works yard out as industrial and taking the rest from rural residential. Okay.
To park, yeah. And like I said, this is an introduction, so a bylaw has not been drafted yet. I'm going to be looking for more direction and comment from the committees.
Okay. Okey-doke. Any questions for Emma? Any additional, any discussion? Okay, recommendation. Council.
I'll move that. The council refer rezoning application RZ04 2018/OCP 01 2018 Veterans Park to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee, and that staff return the results of this referral.
Okay, a seconder for that? Okay. Any discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Okay. You're off and running on that one. Thanks, Emma. Okay, ferry lineup. Another fun topic. Hello, Bonnie.
Hello. Good afternoon. So at the July 9th, 2018 meeting, Council adopted resolution number 18319, directing staff to review the traffic and use of streets bylaw and report back to Council with recommended amendments to address ferry marshalling issues such as line jumping. So this report outlines some of the issues and some proposed solutions. First of all, line jumping. So the issue, I'm sure we're all aware of the issues, but I'll just outline them briefly. Line jumping may occur because of gaps left in the line, especially in the lower Snug Cove. Line jumping also takes place in the crosshatch areas or in spaces resulting from the crosshatch gaps that sometimes persist even as the ferry lineup is in motion. Parking in the ferry lane with no intent of boarding a ferry occurs in Snug Cove. It's sort of a culture here. While the driver is away from their car, other cars may fill in the ferry lineup around that car, and then that car, when it leaves, if it's just gone to the site to get a coffee, does create a space or gap. So some of the mitigation measures proposed in the report for you today to do with ferry line jumping is I've proposed 3 potential amendments to the traffic and use of streets bylaw. And not one, like there isn't a magic sort of silver bullet here, but just sort of this report's meant to be sort of a comprehensive view. That, you know, if we make these little incremental changes, perhaps we can change some of the issues in the code that are existing. So the first proposed amendment to the traffic and use of streets bylaw is that there be a provision for all vehicles in the ferry lineup must pull up within approximately 0.6 meters. I've suggested, as that is the distance that is on the ferry, it's 24 inches to the next car ahead of them in the ferry lineup, or within 0.6 meters of a hatched area. The second proposed amendment is that there's no stopping or parking in the ferry line other than for waiting to board the next sailing. And the third proposed amendment is that all ferry traffic must enter the ferry lineup behind the last vehicle in the ferry line. And as we've seen, you know, because of those, let's say a hatched area, trucks will come skimming down and pull into that gap. And so this provision, perhaps if it's seen on view by a bylaw officer, could be a finable offense. However, for any bylaw amendments to be effective, bylaw resources are required. So to enforce the current and proposed bylaw provisions related to ferry lineup, an increase of 0.1 FTE is being proposed to be considered in the 2019 budget. So the second issue, the traffic congestion, we've seen a lot of that. One of the issues is during an overload situation, it's common for Grafton Road, west of Grafton Road at Mount Gardner Road, to become congested. And bylaw services currently responds accordingly and may issue violation notices for impeding the flow of traffic. Impeding the flow of traffic also occurs throughout the ferry lineup, but mainly in the lower cove when drivers have parked their car and fail to return before the ferry lineup starts to board. If the RCMP or bylaw services observes the scenario unfolding, a violation notice is issued. However, we don't generally sit and wait in a ferry lineup. We just don't have the resources to do so. So we don't, you know, sometimes we'll see it on view, but as I say, we don't have sort of regular patrols of the ferry lineup or sit. We don't generally sit and wait for a ferry to board so that we can see this infraction unfolding. And during the 2016 and 2017, Bowen Island Municipality retained flagging services to address ferry marshalling issues, such as line jumping and road congestion. So in the report that's in front of you today, bylaw server staff, we've proposed a potential schedule for flagging in 2019. Essentially, it is the same pretty well as the schedule this year. However, we have added all Sunday afternoons in July and August, as those have been very busy this summer. So we're proposing that those sailings, 4 hours approximately in the afternoons on Sundays, be covered by flaggers. Corporal Arriaga stated in his letter that is attached to this report that having flaggers is likely the solution, the ultimate solution, as he stated, to address ferry lineup issues. And strategically retaining flagging services during the summer months is in keeping with Corporal Arriaga's suggestion. Public Works has also ordered signage as per Paulo's suggestion, and the signage that Public Works has ordered is congruent with Paulo's suggested wording. And I'm really happy, everybody's probably happy to see that Public Works did install some nice reflective poles at the end of the ferry marshalling area. Bob Robinson was concerned about interference with snow plowing, but he found a way to do that, so that's really great. Yeah, that was good. So the financial implications of these proposed incremental changes would be, of course, there would be increased resources for Public Works just with the signage. I mean, if it's already been ordered, there'd be some communications work to be done to communicate out the proposed change or the changes if the council endorses them. And also for Bylaw Services Department, of course, there'd be some resources needed to carry out the proposed changes. So the total cost of ferry lineup flaggers as per the 2019 schedule presented in this report is approximately $7,000, but we have been lucky the last 2 years that BC Ferries has contributed 50% of the cost of flagging, and so we would pursue that option again for 2019. And the proposed additional 0.1 FTE allotment to Bylaw Services would correspond to approximately $5,000 increase to the Bylaw Services Department staffing resource allotment. So a communication plan for disseminating out changes to the traffic and use of streets bylaw and the proposed flagging schedule would need to be developed. And I put here that the Bowen Island Transportation Advisory Committee and the Ferry Advisory Committee will be encouraged to continue to engage with BC Ferries to discuss cost sharing and other options to address ferry lineup concerns in Snug Cove. So that leads me to the recommendations before you today, and we read those recommendations out. The council directs staff to amend Bowen Island Municipality Traffic and Use of Streets Bylaw number 133, 2005 to include a ferry lineup section with the following provisions. 1, all vehicles in the ferry lineup must pull up to within 0.6 meters of the next car ahead in the ferry lineup or within 0.6 meters of a hatched area.
Oh, sorry, Bonnie, if I could just interrupt you,
Yeah.
maybe, rather than reading through
Sure.
all of this.
Sure.
Let's just call this as,
Sure.
as written in the agenda,
Sure.
get on
Sounds
the
good.
discussion
Thank you.
on it, because I have some very real concerns. First of all, if everybody goes to within 2 feet of the car in front and you happen to be parked, you can no longer get 2 people to kind of fudge their cars a little bit so you can get out. I have found over the years that if I have parked and had lunch and the ferry is late and I'm sitting outside docks and I go to the people there, I say, could you just pull forward a little and could you just pull back a little? And I've always managed to get out of there because people are pretty sloppy in their parking habits or lineup habits. I don't think we have the same requirement that everything be tight the way you would on a ferry. It doesn't really matter if you could fit 5 more cars on the street coming down instead of having 5 at the end of the lineup.
Yes, it does.
What's that?
On the overload situations, it's very important that it be tight down at the bottom.
Well, I mean, tight. How tight is tight? But this is like every day, all day, every day of the year, not just when we have the Sunday afternoon in the summer. The other thing, just on that 2 feet thing, it would be to the edge of the hatch mark. There's no point sitting 2 feet back from the hatch mark, right? It would be to pull out to the edge of the hatch mark. The other thing I'm thinking is if someone breaks into the ferry lineup and you've got a flagger at the top of the hill, it doesn't do you a whole heck of a lot of good. My brilliant idea is we put our person on a scooter with a rotating red light and they sit down on the corner of Dorman and Miller during the Sunday afternoons and woe betide the person who thinks they're going to sneak into the lineup because you can see up the hill, you can see down the hill, and you could actually deal with them. You'd have, because the whole problem with that lineup is it's so bloody long. How do you physically, like I don't, unless you have a crew of flaggers, if someone sneaks in down by Ronnie's parking lot, comes out of his parking lot and shoots into the ferry lineup, and you're up at the school dealing with people, you don't have a chance, right? I think the signage at the top with the metal post, I think losing those metal poles in the signage was because of the paving, really brought back a problem that I thought was pretty much solved. Right? It was a huge issue before Lions Back Artisan Square. Then we put in the different end of line stuff, and in my mind it went away except in very exceptional circumstances. Then when we took that stuff out, we had the problem right back again. I kind of think putting those things back in where it says come for the next ferry, no stopping beyond this point, and there's the metal posts. I'd like to try that first before we get too involved up there with, you know what I mean? We're kind of solving the same problem twice. And the other point I have is this business of the rest of the year, you can't stop and run in and get a coffee and double park in the ferry lineup. Sure, it's a big deal on Sunday afternoon if you could find a spot to butt in down there anyway, which you can't. But the rest of the time, going down to the 10:30 ferry, I don't see where you have to drive up to a spot where you can't do what you want to do. You're only going to take 5 minutes. And I think there'll be a lot of resistance culturally on the island to that. Those are all the things I wanted to say, Bonnie. So I'll open it up to discussion. Michael?
Bonnie, I commiserate with you for having to legislate the unlegislated.
Yeah.
Firstly, actually to the mayor's point, my major concern was number 3. Because at times, I know we just come out of the summer, so we have a summer mindset. But just imagine times when it's not so busy. Someone stops at the square because they're going on the ferry legit, but they've stopped at the square. Why? Because they just popped into the ruddy. The rest of the area down the front is empty. So according to this, everybody else has got to go behind the person parked at the ruddy. I think that's going to be a problem when people see a great amount of space right the way down to the snug. I think in times of less, I think it is. I think your task is so difficult. I think it's best circumvented by providing you and your officers with sufficient people to help organize this at peak times. And rather than try to create some form of Mutakar discipline to the extent of 24 inches or whatever it might be. I just think that is too much. You need some people to manage the situation at peak times. And I think that's the most important thing. It is the people, it is the feet on the ground here that matters, not trying to legislate for something, which, cultural or not, I'm not sure it's legislatable for. I think we're asking the bylaw department through this to do the impossible.
Yeah. That's my thought. Okay. I'll just go around to you. Sue Ellen?
A few comments and a couple of questions. I think the flagging program in general is really successful. Congratulations about that. I see good comments about the flaggers, and they seem to be able to solve an awful lot of problems in a very short time with a smile. So I'm just, whoever the flaggers are, I'm not trying to sort out anybody. I just think that is working. So it kind of supports what Michael's saying about we need the people power. One other person, or there's another set of flaggers, and that's the people at the general store who try to keep their business open for business. And I think they really have to spend time and energy on it too. So I just, it gets a little bit fraught down there trying to get their customers in and out of the parking lot. Anyway, they have to put staff onto it who are out there in the traffic flow as well. I wanted to ask 2 questions. One, you mentioned finable offense, and I was wondering, do we have to create another bylaw to put fines on this, like we did with the moorage in Mannion Bay, or is this all through the traffic and use of streets? Because I just don't see these all as being impeding the flow of traffic. That's one question. The second one is, could we have a ferry bylaw season, like we have a dogs on beach bylaw that just kicks in during the summer months? So it would just go with your schedule here, that we're going to propose anyway, or something like that? I wondered about your impressions. So that's my two questions, the finable offenses and the dogs on beach putting law similarities.
Sure. So the finable offenses, finable offenses be outlined in the streets and traffic bylaw, but you always have to amend the accompanying fining bylaw, for lack of a better word. It has a funny name.
Right.
But it's a bylaw enforcement notification bylaw, so you always have to amend that when you're changing the fining schedule within the bylaw. So it's just something that you just do, part and parcel, you just do. The second question, I believe it would be possible to limit, certain provisions. We do that, we have provisions in the use of beaches bylaw for certain times of year.
Yeah.
In some of the provisions. So I believe it's possible to do that. I don't want to answer for
Right,
sure.
right. Well, it's just another idea. Yeah, okay. And what are the fines? Just so we know when we can answer questions if you have.
Approximately, usually, street, traffic type, parking type is $25 if paid. I think the fine is $50, and then if you pay within 14 days, it's $25.
Right.
But you can change, you can adjust that to, you can have different fines for
Right, I
different
just want to get
infractions.
a
But
sense of
that's
the
the
range.
general,
Yeah,
that's the general fine.
Thank you.
Okay. And a lot of times too, and this is, what we do with bylaws is we do generally tend to give warnings and educate. And then if the same infraction is done twice, then the second time a violation notice is issued.
Okay. And if I can just finish, I'm also not too keen to bring more enforcement to bear if we can find other tools. So that's why I was suggesting just bring it in for a specific season or something, so that we could relax the rest of the year. But anyway, that's just an idea. I'm trying to keep a very open mind about this one. I'm not sure. It seems to me that since moving to Bowen Island, this comes up almost every year in the summer, and it just seems to be a hotter topic with social media now. And I'm not sure it's that different. And is this where we want to put our scarce tax dollars into? And so I'm just open. Could go either way. Thank you.
Maureen?
Well, as the only regular commuter at the table, the ferry lineup is really important to me. And when people jump the line, or when there just are issues in terms of it moving, it's extremely frustrating. And I agree that there's probably a higher profile to this because of social media. But, I mean, basically we've turned a blind eye to what goes on in that lineup. And BC Ferries has only recently been responsive in terms of the cost sharing. Frankly, I think we should not be cost sharing with BC Ferries. I think they should be paying for the ferry marshalling outright for the 100% of the costs involved. And I'm frankly shocked that the cost is so little and that nothing has been done about this until relatively recently. So one of my recommendations is that we just be more forthright with BC Ferries and say, we are engaged in marshalling your customers and you need to pay more than the 50% that you're currently paying. I think that the fines, if this were to become a bylaw, I think the fines should be increased. It's not much of a disincentive for somebody to be charged $25 or $50. The notion of there being peak times, it's extremely hard to predict when the peak times are. I was on a 10:30, whatever it is, a 10:50 ferry last week. It was overloaded. I was on the one after that on another day. It was overloaded. The overloads are happening throughout the day. They're not just happening in the morning commuter runs or the runs coming home. You can't judge. I mean, you're basically thinking all the time. You get down there to catch the next ferry, not the one you're going for. I understand the impulse to not want to over-regulate things, and I sure don't want bylaw officers going down there with rulers and trying to figure out if it's 0.6 meters. I mean, it's going to be silly. So maybe that could be softened up a bit. Maybe it's just pull up tight, pull up closely. And I know there's a degree of subjectivity in that, but there's going to be a degree of subjectivity in this no matter what we come up with. The notion of a ferry bylaw season, where the bylaw would be more actively enforced, actually does appeal to me, because there are times of the year when it isn't an issue. But having this on the books as a tool that bylaw can use when things go bonkers down there, I think would be extremely useful. So I'm going to support some sort of amended version of this recommendation, and the amendments that I see have to do with proximity and probably not much more than that.
Yes, no.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that comment about BC Ferries and cost sharing. So when we first approached them a couple of years ago, I believe the mayor was going to be, you were quite surprised whether we were going to be quite approving if we even got a 50-50 cost share. So we've got that, and I think there's been a change in attitude towards BC Ferries. And I think one way we might have a bit more success is if we can sort of approach them with the wording sort of how we can improve the customer experience. And that's what I think we want to be doing, right, is sort of making it a bit of a more positive tone. I think that's the way they're trying to go at the business is improving that. So I think perhaps that might be a better.
Well, I think when you underline how little it will cost them.
Sure, but by using the positive, then we're looking to improve or not trying to, be over regulatory. It's just a better overall travel experience. So I think that would be a way I think we could get some more help on that one.
That one for just a second.
What?
Just the one thing is, if they pay us 50%, it's not costing us a whole heck of a lot either, but we control it, right? If we start, I can see their concern being if they're paying 100% of the flagger cost, then who says when they're going to come over and when they're not? We can't say, well, we want them for a 10 o'clock ferry on a Monday morning because, do you know what I mean? That type of thing.
To be honest, it is partly through them that we are able to define when we're using them because we're using their data. So if we can show them that based on their passenger data, we've made these assumptions. I think
I like the idea. I'd pay half for control. In other words, we send out flaggers, we incur the cost, we decide when they're going to be out, how many are needed, and they pick up half the tab. And if it's only costing us $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, I wouldn't want to get into a contest with BC Ferries over that. I think we lose as much as we gain if we win that fight. Then
I was just trying to point out, I think you might have more of an open door on that one than you might have a couple of years ago, especially if you use the word improve customer experience.
Sorry.
I think it's worth giving it a go, to be honest with you. I think that we do need a bit of a culture change, and I think the overloads are happening at unpredictable times now, and they're happening more often, and I think the 7:30 ferry is going to be a constant issue this year. I just think we just have overall more traffic, and I think we do need a bit more overall respect on how we use that. I mean, yeah, so I think I'd like to see us sort of do a bit of a trial run on it or something, and just see if it does work. So that's,
Yeah, this isn't going away by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to get progressively worse. We thought we were in pretty good shape when they made that ferry a little bit bigger and everything was fine, but we were into constant overloads now, especially in the summer. But even on Tuesday mornings and stuff like that, after a weekend, it's unbelievable, the overloads. So it's not going away. It's going to get progressively worse. And I guess, it's just another Band-Aid, in my mind, it's just another Band-Aid solution to the fact that we got our ferry line up in the middle of our business section of the island, core. So that also isn't apparently going to go away. And I think the acrimony is caused in most respects from the people not pulling up in a lineup. And, I agree, the merchants are going to they might suffer especially the snug, I mean, obviously that's gonna be tough because people aren't gonna be able to do what they traditionally do. And it's gonna be considered, you know, not Bowen. You know, that's gonna be a real crusher, but if we're gonna solve this problem, we gotta have somebody down there, and we can't have the double parking. Which brings me to a point is, whose responsibility is the double parking? Is that not a police deal?
So
So it's definitely bylaw, it's not police?
They can enforce all our bylaws as well. So we mean, when someone's parked there and they're impeding the flow? is
Yeah,
that-
well,
I mean, they can
not only that,
enforce-
just the double parking, because theoretically, if the ferry lineup is down by Rondi's, going into Rondi's or something like that, and somebody parks outside the snug,
They'll say they're in the ferry lineup, right? They'll say they're.
It's
waiting.
when they're
That's when-
actually impeding a
Yeah,
traffic flow.
Because that's,
when they can-
because you
Oh, I
know,
see,
you know
okay.
that they're,
Well, yeah,
they'll
that
say,
makes
well, we
sense.
were in the ferry lineup and we can't really, you know, there's no other bylaw provisions, so at least if somebody was.
so you're gonna
stopping-
need somebody in place to say, no, you can't stop here, you must go down to the line.
because then
And now, how many
bylaw-
people is this? Is this just one person, one flagger?
There's 2 flaggers.
Oh, good, okay.
There's 2 flaggers, one at
That's
the,
good.
down
Yeah,
the lower
yeah.
cove and one up the top of the hill. It doesn't work with just one.
No, I
You know,
understand.
So, yeah, yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what have I got here? Fines. Yeah, well, you know, who are you gonna fine? How do you fine them? Do you fine them for double parking?
Right now,
Well,
you mean,
if this thing was gonna go ahead,
well, right, we could fine for all these provisions. So it would give us a few more tools in the tool belt for
Yeah.
fining, because right now, all we have is impeding the flow of traffic. That's really what we have in the ferry lineup. We don't have any other, and we have to see them doing that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
it's,
true.
and it's like, it's just, you know, like all bylaws, we create bylaws when there's issues. And, you know, are we down there policing it all the time? No. But at least it gives us that opportunity when there is a kerfuffle, that we have some bylaw provisions. Sometimes that helps.
yeah. To Murray's point, I think that was a point well taken. I mean, obviously you can't stack the cars 2 feet apart. I think just as long as there isn't an ability for another car to get in between them. You know, it's just so the inside cars can exit out of where they're parked. I think, I think we gotta give it a try. And to your point, I think it's tools in the toolbox. We don't have to use it, it's like a dog leash bylaw, you know, but it's there if we need it. And if we need it, we can hammer it, you know, real hard, and people will learn eventually. Until we have another solution. Yeah,
I'm not here yet.
that's it for me. You, Allison?
Well, as to BC Ferry paying, we arranged with them at the beginning of the year that we're going to have flaggers on certain weekends, and then they have agreed to pay
Yeah,
half
it's,
of it,
and
right?
it's because their year is different than ours, so, yeah, so we do
Yeah.
arrange, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we could do a contract with them that we're gonna have flaggers on these days, and they'll kind of have them pay 100% of it.
Okay.
And then if we wanted to hire some extras, then we hire some extras, but they wouldn't be paying because it wasn't in the agreement.
Well, that's just, yeah,
Yeah, so
that's good.
I think, so the .1 FTE at 3.5 hours a week, it seems to me that would be more advantageous because on days when, if the first one's overload, the next one's overload, it usually takes the whole morning. You want that person there for the whole morning doing that. So rather than saying 3.5 hours a week, when in the wintertime there's nothing for them to do, it would be better to have them for 7 or 8 hours a week in the summer, busy months, and not in the winter at all. So I think it needs to be flexible, and I'm not sure that and something that maybe it's a part-time position so that if people start behaving and good behavior, then we don't have to continue to pay for it. I don't have a problem with people going down and filling in a gap in the line, as long as the lineup is not sort of, up the hill. If you can't see the end of the line, then go to the end of the line. But if you're a car and a trailer might go down there and they can't take that last spot, so they take the whole of the next spot.
Right.
And they're a little too big for anybody to fit in behind them except a very tiny car. So why couldn't the car behind them fill in that vacant spot that guy's left because he didn't fit there? You know, so there's got to be some common sense to the whole thing, rather than a black and white rules enforcement. All right, okay, I've got it. And then I notice on the list for 2019, is there not a Tuesday after, why not the Tuesdays after the BC Day long weekend? Is that not a busy time? That's where I thought there was a lot of complaints this year about that, I thought. And as Michael says, Gary says, even on Monday mornings and Tuesday mornings in the summertime, they're both, I think, difficult.
Yeah, the last, so I don't know what day of the week.
Well, BC Day is always a Monday,
It's a Monday.
so you don't have.
I think I mean, it definitely could be. I think this was surprisingly so this year was not busy the Tuesday morning for that particular one. Same with last year. So that hence that. But it's unpredictable. There is that unpredictability now.
Yeah, it's very weather dependent as well.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, it's very weather.
It really is,
And as far as people leaving more than 2 feet, no, if the ferry's running late, well, we just have to go for a little walk and get some exercise to wear off that big lunch.
What do you mean in terms of?
Parking spot.
Well,
the mayor was
do you
suggesting
support
that
the
we.
idea?
No, that we allow, we allow bigger gaps so you can get people to juggle their cars and.
You don't support that?
Well, no, because it just means.
Okay, that's fine, I was just
You
trying to.
do it
be
all
sure.
the way up, so if people come out and they have to go for a walk to clear off lunch, fine, they can go for a walk.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hours if there's a problem with the ferry and it requires parking.
Oh, I see, so you do support the wording that's in the bylaw?
No, I'm happy with the wording that's in the bylaw, I mean.
Thank you.
Not
That's what I
saying leave people, but I don't know how we're gonna enforce it, I mean, it's so black and white, I'm having a problem with the so black and white of it. And the idea about if there's a hatch line, why not pull right up to the edge of the hatch line?
Okay, I think that's,
I mean, that makes much more.
Okay, I'm still working around in a circle, so there's no need for hands. Okay, anything else, Allison?
So the violation notices, can we issue a violation notice for impeding traffic flow, or is that only the RCMP?
No, we can both, it's our bylaw, so we can both.
Oh, but he could, even before we had our bylaw, if somebody was parked in the line and cars had to go around him.
It may be a motor vehicle, I'm not familiar with that.
He could levy that under the Motor Vehicle Act, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
So the,
Oh, and I just want to remind everybody, well, somebody said the other day, the medical, I've got to try and read my handwriting, which never gets good. The medical assured loading is in the hatch marks in front of the general store, so people are not jumping the line when they're parking in there. And then they've gone to the Caring Circle and gotten a sticker and produced their ferry's letter, so they are legitimately there.
But they should show that.
That should be on their back window.
Yeah, there's no question, because I started reading that to somebody on the ferry, well, not reading it, but showed me the thing and I went, oh.
feeling a little.
Make you feel bad?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, moving
At
along.
least 3 seconds.
So yeah, Gary's point is about when are you in the ferry lineup and when are you double parking, right? So we talked about needing to control the ferry lineup, but at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if everyone's parked along in front of the snug and there's no easy place, and you're only gonna be there 5 minutes, you just go in and do it, right? So, but now what if there are people lining up for it, right? When do you say this is double parking? This is impeding traffic, this is failing to move to the front of the ferry lineup, etc. As far as the 2-foot thing in front, why not just move up to the car in front? You know, all vehicles in the ferry lineup must pull up to the
The next car.
the next car ahead.
Well, that matches BC Ferry's wording in their terminals and on
For
the ferry.
people on a ferry, but they were not on a ferry, right? So if you just
But they
say
use
pull
that in
up
the
to-
terminal too. They have exactly
Well,
the
okay.
same language in
Yeah.
the terminal.
I just, like I say, it's trying to enforce 24-inch rules. And of course, they don't bother.
I think that may,
No,
I would take that as an amendment, I think still,
Just pull up to.
yeah, I don't want to get rid of it, because I think one of the issues we've got completely, I don't want to do away completely with number one, because I think one of the issues we're gonna start to have is we need to be using the ferry marshalling area efficiently as possible, especially in overload situations. So we really need every scrap of tarmac down there, because we also need to be able to calculate better where the overload point is. So almost it is, having a numerical thing, 0.6 meters, would allow us to actually better calculate that. But if it's gonna get a sticky point, then I would take it out.
It helps.
Yeah, let's just move on.
It just helps in a bylaw, I know, it helps to have a guideline, and, you know, we're not gonna be done with a ruler, but at least if somebody wants to argue with us and say, I have pulled up there, but they're like 5 feet or something, we can say, okay, we're saying we have to be within 2 feet. So it gives us some guideline in the bylaw, because subjectivity in bylaws doesn't work that well, just through my experience of enforcement. It doesn't work well. So that's why it might seem a bit black and white, but that was just my suggestion, because it is black and white. So it's a bit easier when you're out there when your boots on the ground, it's easier to enforce something that's definitive.
Okay, the only other point I wanted to reiterate was that bylaw enforcement should be highly visible. I'm serious about a red light flashing on top of something, so that that guy from wherever who thinks, I'm not going up there, I can just pull in right here. If he looks up and sees in his rear view mirror, a guy with in bylaw enforcement with a red light flashing up at the corner, he's not gonna pull into those hash marks. He's gonna think, maybe this is not the best idea I had today. So high visibility is a great enforcement tool itself, right? You don't speed in front of a cop.
Well, excuse me, but there's a sign going up the hill that says no U-turn, and an RCMP car sitting right there, and I watched 3 cars make U-turns.
Well, as a,
On the head,
it can happen. Okay, I'll go, Michael, did you have anything you want to add?
All right. I thank you, everybody, for your input, because I have been, for 5 years, I was a commuter. It's been a long time. Now I do go to town often, but now I go on the bus, so it's a little different experience. I think a few more things that we could think about. I support this now, and I support the 24 inches because I know how hard it is in parks, for example, for staff to enforce bylaws if they don't have something that's actually there. People say, well, yeah, I'm close enough. But if it's actually on a leash or not, then you can actually get somebody to put it on a leash or to pull it. I think that we're going to have less room in the ferry lineup because we've approved moving the ferry line up to start after Cardina, right? So that first little bit is going to be empty spaces.
Have we done that?
I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know if it is.
And we also have more parking spaces for Murray because we've got the 3-hour parking now beside the library down Cardina, right? So it's not long-term parking. There's more parking spots that are available for people using the businesses and the restaurants. I think we've got redevelopment of the terminal coming up. So I think it's really good to firm of the BC Ferries terminal. So I think it's really good to firm up our expectations before that. And I think I don't know whether we want to add something about and incorporate a ferry bylaw season into this motion. But I think we're getting close, and I'm in support of the motion. Bonnie, how could I add something here to say, and that staff consider a ferry bylaw season in the
I don't
referrals
know
or
if we have
something?
to formalize that at all.
Can I just ask a question, just what might help with this? If we were to go ahead with this, how long would it take for this all to play out?
Yeah, so I'm leaving fairly soon, so, you know, I would say just with the turnover in staff, I would say, you know, bringing the report, or bringing the bylaw amendments back to council would be probably about 8 weeks or 9 weeks from now.
Good.
Probably post-election. Yeah,
Post-election.
Post-election.
Works for me.
Yeah, that would be my best, just knowing that what staff has on its plate.
There's a big communications component too.
Yes.
I was just wondering if maybe if it was to be ready for next summer, that would give the winter to good communication, and would be, you could test it out then when it's really.
But you want a soft try in the spring.
So
Well, you could do, like,
Easter
right,
is
but now
long,
we give you could get the spring.
Before Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could then get to winter when everything's a little bit.
Shirley, a lot of sensible things have been said, frankly, a lot of good ideas for Bonnie. I kind of got to say that it boils down to a couple of things. Yes, for her toolbox, this is how far you should park right up to the next car, give it up when that's necessary. The fines absolutely needed to be looked at. Really, I think most people would agree, it's the visibility and the bylaw officers to control these busy times, which is paramount. And that we're going to have to work our way through, plus enter negotiations with BC Ferries to see what part of these additional costs they're prepared to undertake. And I'm wondering, in a spirit of moving on and not leaving something untidily straggling over one council to the next, these ideas can kind of be collated by Bonnie and her team, maybe in a way that they could be presented to the new council, giving them the whole of the winter season and the spring to actually spend more time looking at this, because I'm sure it's going to boil down to a budget. They're going to need some extra money, they're going to need some extra ability to fine, and they're going to need to be some way of enforcing the distances. I don't see that happening right now, and also we need to have some intelligent conversations with BC Ferries. So why don't we ask them to collate all these ideas, hold it over, and quite honestly, give people more time to work their way through this.
Oh, deferment seems like an idea.
Well, I was thinking deferment, no, or
Okay.
something
Okay.
along the lines of, that we request staff to, consider the comments and come back with revised, recommendations, because otherwise we're gonna be sitting here changing wording, like pulling right up to the edge and
Correct.
making the 0.1 FTE more flexible and all that stuff. So I would move that council request staff to consider the discussion and come back with a revised set of recommendations.
Yeah. And including fine amounts.
Including fines amounts.
Including, yeah, the amount that fines would be, because that's going to be critical to the whole. Oh, there's no point doing this until you know that, and that's going to be a subject of debate at a council meeting, I would think. Some people want $100.
So, all right, so that it's supportive, the council is generally supportive of the direction indicated in the report and request staff to come back with a refined set of recommendations, including the amounts of, are they tickets or fines?
They're violation.
The amounts for violation notices.
Okay.
You get that, Tyler?
Can you work with that, Bonnie?
That sounds.
Yeah. Okay. Do I have a second on that? Okay, discussion before I call the question.
Yeah, just the point about the staff who are working the line, they're getting skinnier by the day. I mean, they're having to run up and down and up and down. And the notion of a scooter, I'm not so sure I'm keen on the revolving red light. I think that's
Visuals are important.
yeah, but that's really not going.
Oh, I was thinking of a hard hat with a revolving light on the top of it.
I was thinking propeller. Visibility, yeah, maybe not the red light. But I think that they do need help getting along the line. I've seen people running from the Tuscany up to the crossroads and being out of breath by the time they get there. And the real problem is at the very end of the line. They've got a long, long line to monitor, and when it's just the one or two of them, one's got a problem at one end and the other one's got to get to the other, it's not comfortable for them. So I don't know what the solution is. An electric bike?
Rent a scooter.
Whatever, a scooter.
Let's rent one of those scooters, yeah.
But they need a vehicle of some
Yeah.
sort.
Well, the
True.
scooter's flexible enough to fit in another part, you know, part and double parked on the side of the road right now.
Because a car, now with the bike lane, we don't want to park on the bike lane, just want to put it out there, because it's not built for that, and could damage the bike lane there. But, so something, because a car takes up a lot of space, and there's not a lot of spots to pull over and get the car out of the way. So
We also met an electric scooter person at Bowfest who was extremely keen on demonstrating the value of electric
Absolutely,
scooters
yeah.
or electric bicycles on the island.
Let it go.
I will give you his card.
Let it go, yeah.
It's just not Peter Ryan.
No.
No,
No, someone else. Okay.
so it's a salesperson.
Yeah.
Are we voting on the motion?
Sure. Let's vote on this motion. All in favor? Okay, pass unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay,
Well
thank you.
done, Bob.
If we don't see you before you go,
When are you going?
My last day of work is the 21st.
oh, so it's before the next meeting?
Before that.
Well, if I don't see you, you all have fun in these lives.
And now you know what it looks like, right?
You crazy woman?
Thank you.
Okey dokey, moving right along.
While we have, oh, never mind. I forgot to pull something.
Counselor Fast.
Yeah,
Well, you have been busy, haven't you?
well, this has come up during our discussions about the floating buildings being proposed for the Union Steamship Company marina. And thinking about the waterfront that our community treasures down there in Snug Cove. And so I did a little, as the former chair of the steering committee for the last OCP update, I was wondering, where is the information about the Lady Alexandra Promenade and the heritage promenade, which sort of supposed to run from the end of from the festival field along the wooden walkway past the heritage orchard and the cottages that are part of the Union Steamship Marina business, and then along the wooden boardwalk so that you can see the old general store was part of the original plan, and there's a right-of-way for that all the way out along past the old general store, the Boulevard Cottage, the other marine, was Seabreeze Cottage? I don't know the name of it, but the other white one, Seabreeze, yeah, the white one that's at the, that now park staff are in?
Seaside.
Seaside, okay, thank you. And the Heritage Causeway. So these things were all linked. It was a concept plan back during the time of when I worked for Crippen Regional Park and Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. And so I knew there had been arrangements made during the past little while. We've come up with, Allison found a development permit, which was an agreement at the time of, is the agreement between the developer, the Union Steamship Company, and the community. At that time it was Metro Vancouver, and now the rights of way for the Boulevard Walkway and the other things in the development permit are now belong to the municipality. So I just put it down in this format because this is what I found might be the way, this is the way the City of Vancouver does notices of motion. So I did it in this format, and I don't know if it's helpful, but whereas the public has an interest in the main waterfront gateway to the community, as articulated in the OCP, the private marinas and municipal docks define the marine ambience of a village by the sea. Being located at the gateway of the island, they provide the opportunity for residents and visitors to experience and enjoy the waterfront setting. And then there's a bunch of objectives and policies in the OCP about that. Whereas the public also has interests in Development Permit 1790, including the public rights-of-way that I've just mentioned. And I've got a little map here if people want to see. It just runs from the edge of Crippen Park all the way up to the parking lot driveway of the Union Steamship Company Marina, and another little right-of-way that cuts across by the ice cream shop, so that people walking on the boardwalk also see the old general store and could be led in that direction, so they would go up into the rest of the village. So those things are not reflected in either the land use bylaw or the official community plan. Those interests in the public ambience and the views of the village by the sea. And whereas we've been putting a number of small buildings have been added, right? Not just the ones from the Union Steamship Company Marina, but also a couple of ferry waiting rooms, a wharfinger shack down there, maybe that went in earlier, I'm not sure, and possibly the bike shed that's going to come, right? So all these small buildings are being added without a plan to see about this marine ambience to the sea and the marine gateway to the island. They're occluding the view. And I've lived in several communities where people are trying to reclaim the waterfront. And here I'm sort of thinking maybe we should think about this now before we have to go back later and think how did we lose what we once had? It's there in the development permit, and I'm just thinking that if we rezone to allow the additional floating residence buildings, they'll also be between the public areas and the marina. And the DPA there's a development permit area for form and character in place, the kind of, the look and feel of the buildings and materials down there, but in the code, but it's not, it wasn't known to the planners who worked on the OCP that this development permit 1790, is that what it is, 1790, was in place. So it wasn't, it didn't become, as it would normally become, a development permit area in the official community plan. And that means that it doesn't have any of these, it's not reflected in the official community plan. And so it's also not reflected in the land use bylaw. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention and think that amending the OCP to add that, a development permit area to reflect the development permit would be the cleanest way to do it and to capture it for the long term. Here it is only 20 years since the marina was developed, and already the development permit had been sort of lost, but it contains long-term commitments that have to do with our community's well-being. So to protect the community, I would ask that my suggestion and recommendation is that council ask staff to prepare an OCP amendment to ensure that the commitments in development permit 1790 are captured in a development permit area, and that council amend the OCP to include development permit 1790 before the rezoning bylaw 461, which is for the additional floating buildings, passes fourth reading, so that it's all copacetic together. And that's my presentation. I hope I can answer any questions.
Okay, I'll go to Maureen and then to you.
Okay. I just have a question for Daniel. Daniel, if DP 1720 is not reflected in the 1790, if it's not reflected in the LAB or the OCP, what standing does it have?
I mean, there's a number of Islands Trust development permits that exist on properties that were issued by the Islands Trust, and they're still valid. I mean, this DP 1790 subsequent development permits will say that they're sort of varying the existing. As this one doesn't get started, it says that it's replacing or amending earlier DPs, and it had the subsequent ones that say they're amending. This one's kind of like for the one for the new building with the coffee roasting in it, and the floating office building. Both were new DPs that were issued based on the current development requirements, and they just say that, you know, irrespective of previous DPs, they're new DPs that are issued for the property.
They're also listed on the title. I did look through the titles and found it.
Yeah. So it's a valid development permit that governs development at the time, and then it's sort of been amended by subsequent development permits.
So it's not valid.
Yeah.
You know, it was issued under, obviously a former zoning bylaw, former OCP that was in place at the time, and obviously the new OCP and a new zoning bylaw. I don't know how they work.
Okay, I'll go to Allison.
This Lady Alexandra Boardwalk is not contemplated in our OCP anywhere that I've seen.
No, I was just putting that in there as historical perspective. The only, I'm looking at the covenant, the statutory right-of-way covenant that's listed on the template that I found because of the development permit.
But there is a statutory right-of-way for the boardwalk in favor of Metro Vancouver. And.
It's now ours, it's Metro Vancouver now, I checked.
Well, it's still Metro Vancouver, isn't it? Because it
Oh, sorry.
accesses the park, I would have thought, because it's for access to the park.
My
So-
understanding is it's part Metro and
Park, yeah.
part.
So, so one of those, so that boardwalk is built and that right of way is dedicated, and that's point 2B in the covenant. And 2E and 2F and G, well, 2F has been built, that's the little footpath from the end of the parking lot. So I don't understand what a development permit would do, and 2E had a timeline in it that the dedication will be completed 3 months after completion. So if Metro Vancouver or GBRD at the time didn't want it, then it's not done, and we're long past 3 months completion. And the Cantilever Boardwalk, nobody's tagged with any responsibility for building it. So I see absolutely, the marina's built, the berths are there, the parking's covered in the land use bylaw. The boat launch ramp is built, it's been improved, the buildings are subject to the thing, the willow trees there, concrete firewall and the buildings there. I see absolutely no reason why anybody would want to enshrine this in a development permit area, because, what the purpose of it would be, and to tie an OCP amendment to fourth reading of a bylaw that's going to give us tons more affordable housing for workers, which I was getting an earful on in a different matter this morning when I was out. So I'm totally think we would be wasting our time even dealing with this.
Yeah, I can just comment. I don't think it's fair to tie fourth reading of something that everybody's proceeding in good faith on to something that is 28 years old. If there is something in this development permit that was never properly constructed and our planning department does a review and finds that it isn't still, it's still enforceable and this is something that should have been done, then that's kind of another issue. And certainly if the next time an OCP rewrite or update is done, there are things along the waterfront that the committee at the time feels should be included that were covered off in this thing, then that's fair ball. But I don't think that you say we're not going to give somebody fourth reading because we've come up with this thing from 28 years ago. I can't.
I just like to be legally and correctly managing our planning permits, and I guess I'm happy to, take that second part off of there. A permit, a 1 meter wide footpath shall be constructed by the applicant within the public easement right away identified along the inland strip of the riprap. Oh no, sorry, that's the wrong one. There are some things in here that were never done within the time zones, and I think they're gone, they're not done, but I did see the smaller right-of-way from the old general store to the boardwalk become very small, so that it was kind of a few flagstones set into the grass. And now it's back to more what it should be, but these kinds of things get lost over time in a covenant that's just a little notation on title, unless somebody in the community is noticing. And the way for people in the community to be noticing is for there to be a development permit area designated in the official community plan to reflect that. But I'm, I haven't discussed this with staff except for Kathy to say what's the best way to go about getting this on the agenda. So I would, I'd like to ask Daniel. Daniel, do you have anything to say about this? What's your recommendation?
I don't think I have a recommendation.
I think the other problem with this is we don't know if in discussions at the time somebody said, well, instead of doing that, how about if you do this, right? And we won't require you to do that. Like you could open up such a can of worms of what discussions took place 28 years ago. But like as far as future things that should be done with our waterfront, that could be captured in an official community plan as a visionary statement for the future, that can be done. I don't think we need a resolution of this council to do that. It's more a matter of bringing this forward to the OCP update or whatever it is committee when the time comes and say, this thing was captured in 1990 and it's a really good idea and it should be in our OCP, but I don't think you're going to talk about
Okay.
a willow tree.
Then I would, hearing what I'm hearing, how about if we say, number one, that council asks staff to refer or to prepare an OCP amendment to ensure that the commitments in DC 1790 are captured in DPA during the next OCP update or review. Does that capture what you're saying?
Well, can I just add one thing I forgot? The OCP was updated in 1996 by the Islands Trust, and they were the ones that dealt with this DP, so and they would have known about it. Brody Porter was on that file from day one, so they must have felt everything was done and they didn't need to deal with it. And we've got those files here, so.
They'd have to go through it point by point
Okay.
and then try to.
All right, I'm not hearing any support, and so this is fine. I wanted to bring it to council's agenda, council's attention, and see whether people had concerns about the waterfront and about the commitments to the public being captured for the long term. And hearing not, I withdraw.
Okay. Is there no further discussions? Okay. Next up, Councillor Nicholson. What have we got happening in Metro?
I think Metro's hunkered down, getting ready for the next round.
Waiting to see who the next batch will be.
Yeah, so there've been no Metro meetings over the last month and a bit. What's in your agenda package are two pieces of information. One is a letter from the chair, Brett Moore, and it's sending back to me and to you the new regional parks land acquisition plan through 2050. It's on the website. The link is given in Brett's letter if you want to take a look at it. It's quite ambitious. And then the second point is just a note concerning the RFP for the Davies Orchard Consulting Services for the design phase, the detailed design phase for the Davies Orchard. So an RFP was issued, there were responses, and there were 3 bids that are being considered. One is PWL Partnership, the second is RF Binney and Associates, and the third is WSP Canada Group Limited. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a decision made on that. The decision would be made by procurement, Metro procurement, and Metro Parks staff. So at some point, the Metro Parks Committee will be informed.
Are we having representatives of the UBCM? Are we going to have someone talking with Flynn Rowe with us?
We can certainly invite them to come and join us. They're going to be there. Neil Carley, the director, and Neil Carley is the manager, and Mike Redpath is the parks director. Both of them will be there, and both of them are amenable to coming along with us.
Okay.
I think we should invite them. Let's invite them.
They have been invited already.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
For sure.
Okay.
Is that good for you?
That's good. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Islands Trust.
I have a report on page 536, which is, it's a housekeeping matter. We have a municipal tax requisition calculation, and I think the report's self-explanatory, but it includes amortization in the calculation of what they requisition from Bowen Island Municipality. And when that procedure and process requisition calculation was written by Craig Elder just before he retired, we were collecting tax to cover amortization. I discovered, with a little bit of egg in my face, I should have discovered 2 years ago, we stopped collecting tax for amortization of the Allen's Trust. So none of the local trust areas are collecting amortization. So this is a very simple housekeeping amendment to the motion, and the treasurer, Julia Mobbs, is going to present it to the September Trust Council meeting. So what I would like from council is a recommendation that council advise the Allen's Trust that they support the amendment to Allen's Trust Policy 7.2.6, municipal tax requisition calculation to exclude amortization expense from the municipal pool.
Okay, and you so move?
And I would like to add, based on an email I got from Julia this afternoon, the policy also says that Trust Council will provide the municipality with a 30-day notice of intent for any proposed amendments and 30 days to respond to a referral regarding proposed amendments unless otherwise mutually agreed. So I would like to add, and that council advise Trust Council that they are amenable to waiving the 30-day notice period.
Yeah, I think it would be churlish not to do that, and obviously we will. Does this have a financial impact?
Yes, it means they'll collect less. They've been collecting money from us for amortization, which they have not been collecting from the local trust areas. So we've been paying a little extra every year.
What kind of numbers are you talking about?
It's $1,500. It's not a big number, but in principle, it's the principal.
So, yeah, it's not going to
Maureen?
Will we get a refund?
No. Tried that one on for size.
They spent it.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion before I call the question? All in favor? Passed unanimously.
I have a few more things to add.
Sure.
This is the Islands Trust update.
Mhm.
I had an email today or a call from Islands Trust who were interested in our meeting that we've requested with BC Hydro. So if and when that meeting gets organized, because they haven't confirmed yet, I said it would be fine if Chair Luckham and probably Claire or somebody like that comes and joins us, because it partly came through the delegation that came to the last Trust Council from the Gulf Island Solar Co-op, I think, Salish Sea Solar Co-op, who were saying that the proposed changes that BC Hydro is making to the net metering, which means money that they pay if your solar panels are putting money back into the grid. They're proposing changes to that to sort of put a cutoff, and that would prevent solar co-ops and other groups like that from growing, and it would also prevent, I think, people who share wells or share driveways from sharing a little insulation. So I want to talk with them about that. I've been collecting some info. They'd like to join us, so I just wanted to, if that's okay with everybody. Good, if it happens. And then just the other things that are in our info items here, 1519, 1520, 1521, and 1522 are all issues to do with Islands Trust and planning. And I won't go into them here, but just to refer people to them. That's it. Oh, and we meet, next Islands Trust Council meeting is right after UBCM, so in 2 weeks, we're going to be meeting on Keats Island. So anybody who wants to come over on their boat or join us, we're in the neighborhood, and anybody's welcome to come, including members of the public, and any delegations who might want to present to Trust Council, contact me or Allison, or look at the Trust website.
Is the agenda posted?
I don't think the agenda is posted yet, just the schedule, so there's still time to get on the agenda as a delegation, should anybody wish to address Trust Council. So I just wanted to mention that they're coming to the council.
There is one interesting session on the schedule on the Water Sustainability Act, which
Yes. Perhaps with the two trustees here, I could ask a question. 2 or 3 months ago, I raised the point that the requisition for the island is now just a little bit south of $300,000, a 20% increase on the previous year. So my question was, What, in simple, easy to understand terms, is the explanation that we can hand out to members of this community? Well, I haven't exactly been swamped with the reply, but I believe it was going to be handed over to the one of the committees, I believe the Communications Committee. And I question, here is my question, are we going to get a simple and easy to understand reason why we're being faced with a 20% increase and now the annual bill for this year
It's
is
all
just
in
south
how
of...
the calculation works.
Sorry?
It's all in how the calculation works.
Is that the explanation?
We pay 18.7% of the cost of trust council and trust fund board, so if those costs go up,
That's in legislation,
and
Oh,
so our share goes up.
I'm aware of that, but is there a reason, 20%, if I gave a supplier of mine, or I was given by a supplier, a 20% increase, I think I might turn around and they might just say, well, that's what's legislated. Well, that's wonderful. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to hear that it's legislated, but my question is, what is it that happened at Islands Trust that actually generated those extra costs?
Islands Trust Council's expenses went up, and I can't tell you off the top of my head. Trust fund board expenses went up, and they went up higher than local planning went up, which meant those two areas got tagged with a higher percentage of the administration costs.
Okay.
But Michael, if I may interrupt, you kind of wandered a long way off our agenda just now, and we did have this discussion once before when this first came up.
I'm just waiting for my reply from the communications, which I haven't had.
It's me who volunteered to write something up, and I will write something up, and I just have been writing up other things instead. So,
I mean,
it's
I
how
can
much
tell
can you
you
do in a
why the
project?
percentage went up.
Yeah.
But Sue Ellen was going to write the reason
The
of went out,
benefits.
what we got for
It's
that.
like being a province in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wait to
So
hear.
I will put this back in Sue Ellen's court
Yeah, sure.
to deal with.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
So pulled from the consent agenda, we have 3.6, was it, who wanted that one pulled, was it yours?
I think so, and I forgot to pull to.
3.6, yep,
is
the strategic plan report, page
Yeah.
34.
Yeah, and that is only under my name.
Well, my first question is this just here for information? Or Are we publicizing it, sending it out, or whatever? Because if we aren't doing anything other than having it here, then I'll just pass on my comments. But if it's going to get glossied up and distributed to the public, then I've got a few questions.
I don't,
I don't think there was any intention of doing that.
no.
It certainly hasn't been passed
Because
on
there's
to the
some areas
communications
where
team.
wording needs some clarification. We didn't give any examples. There's some work plans mentioned. Are they coming to council?
Right, I think this was more a reminder to council that this is where we're at, and if we'd like to get something done, here's a little something for you to read over and just see how you like to go into an election with this not being done the way you said. For those doing such a thing.
So I will move that we receive it for information.
Second. Okay, second, all in favor? Passed. Now, 3.7, who wanted that one?
I did, just briefly. What you have is a report on the speaker series and some related housing items. I prepared this primarily for the new housing committee, housing advisory committee, that'll be meeting on Friday morning for the first time. And it gives them a sense of what the resolutions are that we passed in the last year related to housing, refers them to the bylaw, the OCP, and the affordable housing policy, links to the 5 components of the housing series, links to the community lands report, and then the last part of it is, these are the questions that the introductory session in the Housing Speaker Series ended with. what appear to be the best practices from other jurisdictions. How have this and other prior councils been successful, and so on. And the comments here, these are my notes that I pulled together based on our discussion. So it's kind of a subjective response in some respects. And I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing in here that you would like to qualify in some way, or and also to ask you, is there any particular direction that you want to provide to the Housing Advisory Committee? Michael and I are both on that committee, so we'll be having discussions with the committee members. Of the folks on the committee, 7 out of 9 were in attendance at the Community Lands Workshop, which is great. It means they've got that foundational piece. But I wanted to know if there was anything you wanted to pass on.
Good. Sorry, after you.
I'm in the questions section.
Sure.
Question number 1, you're referring to a Rollo report for West Van, or was it the Rollo report that he did for us? Because he did one for us.
It's the Rollo report for West Van. If you remember, part of that report had a summary of all of the tools that could be used in bringing affordable housing into play. And it was the summary that we used to identify things like the Housing Reserve Fund, and pretty well every municipality has one of those things. So it's an appropriate step to keep pursuing that.
Okay, so is that Rollo report in the links anywhere?
Yes, it's in the report from the March 1st session where we reviewed material and looked at potential next steps. It's there.
And then point number 3, and I didn't go back and look at the actual report, but you've said that our inclusionary zoning policy is only for private sector development. Doesn't it say developer in the policy? Why would you say it was only for private sector?
And that's a good question. I'll look at that.
Okay, and point number 7, the second bullet, and if this was quoting me, it's not quite right. The rationale for the Housing Corporation appears to have been would keep, well, it doesn't make sense, the wording, would keep municipal control of community land rather than giving up or leasing outright. So the rationale for the Housing Corp was that the lands would be kept in municipal ownership.
As opposed to municipal control?
Yes, municipal ownership, because those lands would have been given as a community amenity for rezoning.
Okay.
So the logic then is you don't give them up. And leasing for $1 is still on municipal ownership. So that's very much a viable option that would be considered. But taking land and then turning around and selling it to somebody or giving it to somebody, then you're not keeping the ownership of the amenity. So that's what we were getting at. So I think the word more is owned, not controlled, because you can still control it.
And the garbled bit there, it should read to have been that it would keep. So that it is missing.
Okay.
That was,
So,
I think Michael was on the list too.
Okay. My question is related to 1521 on our info agenda, which is Islands Trust Rehousing Needs Assessment Reports. And if you recall, I brought this up a couple times during the past year because many of the islands had the same housing needs assessment process done for them. And we have the possibility still of having that done for us where the Islands Trust may pay half. So I would wonder what the committee would think about that. Personally, I think we need an updated housing needs assessment report to help us apply for grants and to make these decisions about what kind of housing where and all the things we've been talking about. And I think the idea of some other group paying for half and that it's also part of that same data set so that we can compare each other with them would be something worth asking them.
Just one point, and I'm waiting for information on this. Selena Robinson, if you recall,
Yes.
in the late spring, announced that one of the initiatives of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs was going to be that each community would be required to do a standardized housing assessment.
Yeah.
The provincial government has not yet, so far as I'm aware, has not yet announced what that would be. But they also said at the time that the provincial government would pay for these standardized housing assessments that they want done throughout the province. So I'm expecting that will come into public, fair, and that might override an Islands Trust related assessment, or it might be complementary.
We may, I think the Islands Trust one might be bigger, or I had misunderstood. I thought that the province was going to say some parts that you had to have included in your housing needs assessment, but that we could ask other questions as well. So that's one thing that would be great if you could include just this info item and people can check out the links or whatever. And then the other thing, I was really struck with Josie Osborne's last presentation to us about the short-term vacation rentals and how it's a really good idea to get ahead of that. And she had Tofino, the municipality of Tofino had contracted with a service provider who tracks the online rental. I forget what it was called. Host compliance, that's it. And I wondered, as a way for this new committee to wrap their minds quickly around the idea of short-term rentals, whether Tofino's example and what I'd like to know is that host compliance program something that we should be looking for
at some point in time,
and sooner rather than later according to her. So I just thought if it could be early on the agenda for the housing needs, for the housing committee, that would be great.
Yeah. So picking up on that one is the whole new sales tax regime. So we're going to be getting they're going to be collecting sales tax for any of these common providers, like VRBO and whatever, they're going to be, or Airbnb, they're going to be collecting sales tax. And the people that are renting out are, if they're renting out for more than, can't remember the number of days, then, or it's 2,500 of income, then they're going to have to start remitting sales tax. So there's going to be a lot more data out there soon.
I think on the host compliance is relatively new. The fact that they can scrub just about every internet platform.
It's great.
So that no one now will be flying under the radar in the traditional old way of doing business. That's history. And to your original point that...
Well, if they're online,
Okay.
So the point that was made by Maureen is that the direction is going to be important, because it'd be so easy for this group to go wandering all over the map, and we're going to have to try and keep it fixed, directed, and responding to council's input.
So one of the first things on our agenda is to just establish a work plan for council review and approval.
Yeah.
This is it's quite a scope.
Yes, it could be very
amazing scope. Huge.
Okay, moving right along.
Yeah.
315, someone wanted the paving contract.
So there was a recommendation.
So for 3.7, the council received the report titled Bowen Housing Speaker Series Program Update and refer the report to the Housing Advisory Committee for its review, work plan development, and recommendations. So I'll move that.
And Gary seconded, or Sue Ellen seconded, and all in favor? And that is passed unanimously.
Okay.
Sorry, 315, who wanted to pull that?
We had
3.9.
I pulled 3.9 and I'm just having a look at it, and I think I pulled it because Raj and I had a little bit of a conversation.
Right.
But it's, I think what I pulled was because of some
two grammatical errors
typos,
in
and I think those
municipalities
can
that
be
should have been
fixed.
Y with an apostrophe S rather than
Oh, we were,
IS.
and were we going to change interest earned to more common wording called income?
Sorry?
Interest earned to the more common wording of income in policy in 4D.
Is this something we need to pass tonight?
Yeah, we should.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Interest or should be credited to the viewer suggesting change wording from that?
Change the interest to income because some of the MFA funds do have capital appreciation.
I'm okay with that, I mean, I'm happy with interest, but if you're happier with,
Well, income's just a little broader.
Okay.
Are those the only two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move the recommendation as amended.
A little tweak to the recommendation that needs to say Housing Reserve Fund bylaw to be consistent.
Oh, this was in the previous one?
No, 3.9.
This one here.
Yeah, sorry, affordable housing.
The bylaw number 467,
Oh, sorry.
2018,
Right.
cited as Affordable Housing Reserve bylaw number 416 to 2018,
Got it.
as amended.
Affordable Housing Reserve Fund
Fund.
bylaw.
Or reserve fund bylaw.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's
Now I
now
get it.
consistent throughout.
Okay.
Okay.
Attached as Appendix A as amended. To the report dated August 16th. Be read it first, second, and third time.
Okay, that is so moved, is it?
Yeah,
And seconded?
Second.
And all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, 3-9.
Can I just say that was important?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
better read it
Thank you.
again.
It's a motion from about, we've passed that motion at council years ago, it just
But we never had a bylaw.
Never
Okay,
made it
now.
to the top of the heap.
But
Okay.
first, second, and third, it's got one more to go, right?
Yeah.
Moving on to 3:15,
Yeah.
because I want to eat before I come back at 7 o'clock.
Here.
Who wanted to talk about
Melanie.
paving?
We, the
Okay.
Bob's not here.
Bob's
Oh,
not here,
what's-
so we
what's the
can't deal
question?
with it.
Um,
So do
This is simply a question for Bob about what's being done or something, or?
Yes, it's regards to how it overlays with the transportation plan and our subdivision and development servicing in regards to, count to the roads going, whether or not we'll see, improvements to the shoulder. We'll move up, whether we'll have pedestrian access on these ones, because these, certainly County Road is part of the newly adopted pedestrian network.
Right.
Whether this would trigger that, and the other ones also would trigger the subdivision development servicing of newly adopted bylaws, so that was my question.
Yes.
I think it would.
So this is all stuff that's in the tender documents. As to the
Yes.
scope that they bid on, and then tenders have closed and so on. So I don't think we can really change anything. It's more a matter of information for Bob, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you may not agree with what he's done. I'm not suggesting that
It was a question, whether or not
that was
had been-
included, yeah. Do you-
I had a question too. I thought we had passed, it's to do with how the report presents the work as being, the decisions of which roads as being complaint-driven. And it suggests that this will lower the number of complaints. And my suggestion is that it might raise the number of complaints because people say, well, that's how you get the road paved. And I wondered if we have a asset management plan, didn't we pass something
We're
about that?
working on it.
Working on it, yeah.
All right, great. And is there, maybe Raj, you can answer, is there some kind of road surface replacing plan that we're working from? Or do these just, I'm just wondering about.
Yeah,
the
Bob
complaint
does
part.
have a plan,
Yeah,
and it lays out what he'll be paving during the year. So these works would be in line with the plan that he has, as far as I know.
okay, thank you.
And to your question, I can't answer them, but we can have Bob answer your questions and concerns. But again, I don't think that those are tied into the decision that's being, or the recommendation that's being.
I'm happy with
yeah.
I'm happy with the change of
Yeah.
roads, because I think the improvements on these roads will also inevitably improve pedestrian access, especially for Cowan Road, because that was one of the issues raised. So I'm happy with that. It was just whether or not the works will include shoulder improvements.
Okay.
Because, especially for Cowan Road, because Cowan Road is now part of the adopted pedestrian network, it also triggers a walking trail. That one has a walking trail now associated with it, the improvements to
You're
that
talking
one.
about the old town one?
Cowan Road
Bishop's
as
Hill.
Bishop's Hill Cowan
Yeah.
Road.
But is the walking trail cut off at Willie's Way?
Is
Because,
to connect down to, oh gosh, it's the road, was the main road down there?
Adams.
Adams
Adams.
Road, and it's to create a circuit for the Cowan neighborhood, so it also goes down to Sunset. So anyways,
Okay.
that little bit there,
Okay.
so I was just wanting to find out now that we've got a new subdivision and development servicing bylaw and the adopted transportation plan, whether or not the improvements to those roads will trigger those improvements needed for that plan.
Whether that be improved.
Yeah, we can get back to you on that.
And then my other little request was down under the financial implications. It says Public Works would like the ability to add additional roads to spend up to be able to spend the remaining difference. And I was just wondering if we could add to the two words, or just add a little bit here. It says the ability to add additional roads / and active transportation infrastructure, because we do get equal amount of complaints on pedestrian road safety, and so that would also just include any improvements to existing shoulders as well.
Where is this bit?
that's not in the resolution.
No, but it is under financial implications. Public Works would also like the ability to add additional roads, and I just would like to be able to add additionally as well, active transportation infrastructure, so that
How
he could
about,
also respond to issues when he gets complaints for improvement on shoulders and whatnot. So it's still allowing access the remainder, but also just
But
lining
we're
it up.
not
Do you wanna-
passing a motion to allow them to access the remainder at this point.
should we ask Bob to bring that to a future council
Right.
meeting with that amendment? Would that be a
I
way to
just
do
wonder what
that?
the,
Yeah, because what he's saying is we would like the ability to add
But he
additional
hasn't
roads.
put that in the.
So that's not,
resolution.
I mean, we're approving the 432,
No,
and
you
we're
approved it.
approving the 498.
No,
We're
You've
approving
approved
the
the
298.
432, so you're approving the 298.
We're
Yeah.
only approving the
Grandview
tender for
Blacktop
298.
tender. Yeah, that's all he's asking for in this.
Yeah,
yeah,
Oh,
So he's not asking for tender for various, yeah,
yeah.
he's
So
just
it
saying that they've been reviewed.
So why don't we deal with the motion and then, we ask Raj to, ask Bob to come to the next council meeting and.
this might be time sensitive
Right.
too.
It is.
Yeah.
But
This
what-
one's
That's
definitely.
fine, that's fine. All I would like to do is for the remainder pool of money, which Bob would like to be able to continue to access for additional small improvements, that we also are able to, just to expand it a bit, to include active transportation. And basically, so he can also deal with complaints coming in about
Pads, curb,
curbs, paths and everything, so it's.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, but just
I'd like
so
to-
that I can eat.
Yeah, I'd like to move I'd like to move the recommendation as written.
Second.
All in favor? Yes, because it doesn't change.
No.
This is just approving this one contract, the balance that we have. So Roger will talk to Bob and get
Yes.
that to Melanie.
I support Melanie's idea, so.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
That's great.
I mean, it's,
He's gonna
The
have
other-
to come
The other
back.
thing I'd like to also find out from staff is that I believe the change, the road, the change was that Dorman Road was to be paved this year, and if that's gonna be delayed, I'd just like to know the timeline on that one, because as long as it's for next year, because that one is absolutely passable by car, there's no problem with it, they've gone and done a bit of patchwork on it. But I am receiving some comments about the safety for bikes and especially for scooters. So I think we can, yeah, so I think it's totally fine to live with for a year, but as long as it's still on the books for next year.
For sure.
Okay.
and then we have,
15.2.
Michael wants us to pull 15.2.
Yes, it is
Do you
one.
want to talk about a bigger ferry?
No, actually not. And what is not attached here, actually, the letter that was written to Mike Corrigan, and the reply came from Mark Collins, the president and CEO.
Yeah.
I did in fact send a copy to yourself, I think you were on holiday. And I ran it by Kathy. It's a very short letter. Firstly, it just acknowledges the individual's letter about ferry overloads.
Is this,
Oh, yeah.
so maybe we could just, get Tyler to circulate Mark
Well,
Collins'
I will,
response?
but the point I want to draw, just to his third paragraph, and I will get it circulated, and I don't know whether it struck
human and it's strange to struck Kathy as myself. He says, there's no plans to utilize a larger vessel on this route, fine. The existing roadways are unable to accommodate a greater volume of traffic. Any changes to the infrastructure network outside our terminals require an initiative of the Ministry of Transport. I will circulate that and pass that on because that is a really strange final paragraph.
You don't have a big enough road to take cars.
Yeah.
Well, but it also refers to the Ministry of Transport, which is totally irrelevant, but
The letter, I will have it circulated, but I do want Melanie and other people involved because this is a really, really strange response to a letter. And it's something
No,
that we
it's
need
not
to
a
see.
strange response because he knows the inadequacy of the marshalling. And we can't marshal, we just had that discussion for any more than the size of the area we've got right now. And he told us that years ago.
But hence why we're going, we do have a meeting confirmed with Committee of Transportation, and we are on that, we would like to talk about.
Not to make a meal of it before it deprives of a meal.
Only to give us more capacity.
Okay,
I was just putting it out there so we could,
I'll send it to you.
yes.
We can resume this when we come back.
Yes, we can always.
The recommendation is that the special council meeting
We
be
already
recessed
passed that, it was in
and
the consent
reconvened immediately.
resolution, wasn't it?
Marie, I think we need to pass a resolution to receive that item that was
Would you-
pulled from the
Oh, to
information.
receive Urban's letter.
Do you, okay?
Well, do we?
No, it's just an information.
It's an information,
It's for information, I can circulate, if you're
Yeah,
okay to circulate
It's not
information.
a,
He didn't pull it from the consent
No.
agenda, did he?
I have it.
No. It's not a- No, it's not an.
I move we receive information item 15.2.
Second.
all in favor, pass unanimously. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
Special council meeting
Recess.
recessed and reconvened immediately following the closure of the public hearing on Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. Second.
So moved.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good stuff. And we'll be back here in 24 minutes. Okey dokey. So. So a public hearing was held on July the 30th to receive submissions from the public regarding proposed official community land amendment bylaw number 432, 2017, and land use amendment bylaw number 433, 2017. This public hearing is continuing today, September 4th, 2018, in order to receive further submissions from the public. Anyone who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. Excuse me. Any person who wishes to present a written submission to council may do so, and all written submissions must be received by council before the close of this hearing and presented to the minute taker. If a member of the public wishes to address council, they will be asked to sign the speakers list and should begin by clearly stating their name and address for the record. Comments should be related to the subject bylaw and be directed to council. Members of council may ask questions to seek clarification following your presentation on points raised. However, the main function of the council members is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council members to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for viewing during this hearing. Your only opportunity to comment on the proposed bylaws is during this hearing, as members of council may not receive further submissions, verbal or in writing, after the close of this hearing. Council can determine when the proposed bylaw will be scheduled for consideration, and council may either adopt or defeat the bylaws, or alter and then adopt the bylaws, provided that the alteration does not alter the use, increase the density, or without the owner's consent, decrease the density of any area from that originally specified in the bylaw. So, this is the continuation of our public hearing. What have we got, Tyler?
The only addition that we have is an on-table letter from Don Youngson, which is part of your agenda package.
Okay.
Was that part of our regular council
Yeah,
agenda?
and it was. It was right, yeah.
Oh, there it is. Oh, that was special council, that was public hearing. I got confused.
Okay,
I believe at the moment we'll
so there are,
presentation from Daniel.
we have no verbal presentations?
There's nobody signed up to speak to.
Okay, so I will ask again. I'm calling it for a second time for public input and calling a third time for further submissions. There being no further submissions, we adjourn the public hearing.
Well, then we have to do one of these recommendations at the bottom. So I would move that all written and verbal submissions regarding Lone Island Municipality Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 432, 2017, and Land Use Amendment Bylaw number 433. Did they really go back to 2017, Daniel? 2017, up to and including September 4th, 2018, be received, and that the public hearing be adjourned.
Excuse me. Second. Yeah.
Okay, any discussion before I call the question? All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Okay, that's that. I will now reconvene. Okey-dokey.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so we are reconvened. The only item left on our agenda, item 16.1. So, I'll make a few comments if I may to start. I think this is in fact, an extremely modest and incremental approach to dealing with the community lands. We've owned the lands for over 12 years and done nothing with it. And the reality is that doing the OCP amendment and the rezoning still does nothing with it. There's nothing built on Lot 2 yet, which was rezoned some time ago. Nothing built on Lot 3 yet, which was rezoned a long time ago. Rezoning the land doesn't mean very much when the community owns the land. Because whereas this gives lots of rights to the owner, when the municipality is the owner, there's considerable opportunity for further discussion and public process before we get down to the point of actually subdividing off a piece of it and moving ahead and doing something with it. So this is really, I think somebody said it was kind of a shopping list, particularly the area one thing where all manner of things theoretically could happen if somebody wanted it to happen, had a process for making it happen, and the council of the day was supportive of the project happening. So really, as I said, nothing moves ahead. Hopefully, the area up by Green Road, that lot can be sold off and become somebody's home and put some money into reserves for us. Hopefully, the area up by Belterra, and I'm speaking personally, I hope that that can become a co-op housing project with 20 units. I think that would be feasible, it would work, financially viable, and would end up with people owning their own homes on Bowen. And I think that the Area 1 is going to be a long time before anything really happens there, but at least we put it out there. We've divided Lot 1 up and we put it out for people to think about what they would like to see there in the future. So that is all I have to say on it. Is there any other discussion before we work on the motion itself?
I'm trying to find.
Yes, Gary.
I think due to the feedback from gathering we had, the housing gathering on the community lands and that sort of thing, I think we should drop the light industrial from area 1 on the lot 1, or area.
Well, that would be a change of use, and that would kill the whole thing. That would send us back to,
Would it?
yeah, you can't change of use.
I thought we could pull some stuff out of there. What are you thinking?
The mayor has the language that you read, but so after a public hearing to alter the use,
Oh,
to
okay.
increase the density or decrease the density without, so we could decrease the density of the land, I guess, with the owners and the consent, but altering the use or increasing the density
The use is-
So
yeah, the use
we're
is-
altering the
use is a
use
problem.
by deleting industrial, correct?
by removing.
Correct,
users,
yeah,
that's
well,
what
Yeah.
we
yeah.
do.
So what, the one thing I was going to raise, and I'm going back to the motion about the public, the closure of the last public hearing, which I think is the minutes of the public hearing. The staff report back to council regarding the July 30th public hearing regarding Bow Valley Municipality Official Community Plan Amendment by online use by that, and then the public hearing be adjourned to September. It's normal process that we get a report from staff after the public hearing, putting together the themes from the public hearing and,
Yeah.
you know,
That.
so we haven't had that
No.
because the report from staff that we got before was dated July 26th, so it was before the public hearing. So we haven't had the normal staff report on the public hearing and the themes that
Correct.
came out of it, correct?
Sorry, we have that, don't we?
No.
I have something here that said who said what.
That's the minutes, but we don't have the report from staff that has compiled what I would call the themes and if they saw anything from the public hearing that required even some technical amendments or changes.
So, so generally after a public hearing, we return with a staff report for
Yeah.
consideration of third reading.
And we haven't got that.
So is that what you, is that your understanding?
And that's for the motion that we passed.
That's
Yeah, the
what
public.
we've done, that I'm aware for every public hearing
Yeah.
that I've been here.
But you didn't do it for this one?
No,
No, because
Right,
they do
we're
it
here right
following
now.
the closure of the public hearing.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
because the public hearing is
Yeah.
is ongoing now.
Yes, yeah.
yes,
And because we wanted to have
the opportunity
the
for.
Right.
parts of it
So-
responded to lot 1 and
Well, we wanted the public to be able to have the opportunity to provide comments because of that document.
Right,
And they couldn't because that document hadn't been released.
Right. so that was the reason for,
So the normal process would be that staff would come back to the September council meeting, the 24th, with a report on the public hearing and recommending or not recommending third reading. And I think we should follow that process.
well, that will
also
kill it then,
since
right?
Daniel was sick on July 30th, so we had his written report.
Yeah, I was just gonna say more than that, essentially, it's what I've done every time is when the public hearing closes, that's when I prepare the report with all the comments, so the public hearing is closed, so I have to prepare the report.
And that is what we did get in the minutes of the
No,
last
well, we got the
public hearing.
minutes, which is just a verbatim what everybody said. It's not
Right.
summarized into themes or.
It's not analyzed, but it's
Well, there's
recommendations
very
from
few
staff.
comments, so keep that in mind. There were what, five or six people commented? This was not exactly a sort of public hearing that one would expect with 50 people at microphones. And the minutes of the meeting captured everything that they brought to council for our consideration.
Well, the minutes were 4 pages long.
Yeah.
And a page-long list of people that wrote in submissions.
However, the submissions had been received before. Well, okay, but the bottom line here is, if you want to kick it down the road, you can, and if you don't want to kick it down the road, you don't have to. We can give it third reading and send it off to Islands Trust and get it back for our consideration before the end of our term, or we can kick it down the road and see how many more council terms we go without doing anything to get the process started on this land. But it's going to cost the next council the possibility of getting money in their reserve fund by selling some property. And it's going to kick down the road the possibility of co-op housing. And I don't think it's necessary when the light industrial end of it is all still in the hands of council in the future anyway, and doesn't have to happen. It's entirely up to council. I'll go to Maureen.
Can we just sort of work through the dates here, because there was some discussion of being able to have an
September
accelerated
24th is
process.
the council meeting.
Yes.
So
So
September-
that's the staff report and possibly third reading.
Right.
And then you refer it to the Allen's Trust. You've
With
got
the
30
request-
days.
With the request that they accelerate
And-
given the circumstances.
Well, they have 30 days, and if you refer it on the 25th, you get it back on November 25th, and,
I'm sorry, November the 25th?
well, 30
October.
days
October.
from October 20, still October 25th, yeah, would come back in October 25th. So if it was given third reading and no objections, then usually fourth reading is a standard thing unless there's some conditions which we haven't imposed, so
So our
there's
final,
plenty of time.
our final meeting of
Is in the
this
end of
term is
November.
October.
At the end of November, we're in office and, oh, sorry, the end of October, sorry.
It's
I'm out of
October
my-
22nd.
Yeah,
So it will be, our term will be over.
yeah.
Is there a council meeting though?
If
Our
there's a
term
council
is over.
One
as
last
of the
council
day
meeting.
The next council is sworn in, which
Yeah.
can't be before the first
Following-
10 days
following
in
month.
November.
Right, I mean, do you really believe that anything is going to come up between now and the next meeting that we haven't heard over the last 6 or 8 months? I mean, this thing has been kicked around.
I
so
thought
much.
there were some little technical things that needed to be dealt with in some of the written submissions.
Daniel, do you have any?
That were some
Suggestions.
Was there a suggestion about supportive housing and why that wasn't included?
There was a question about that from Peter Frinton, but it also was counterbalanced by a concern about there being too many uses to begin with. So it was an odd kind of suggestion. You know, on one hand, there's too much here, and on the other hand, by the way, you missed this.
I was wondering why we hadn't put supportive housing in.
I'm gonna say, I don't have anything that I'm aware of right now. But I'd also generally go through it in a report to bring back to you if I had something, but I don't know.
So
So it's been
just a note, the new council's sworn in on November the 6th.
Right.
So we have the 24th, the 9th, and the 22nd as our council meetings.
Regular.
Right.
Yeah.
But when it goes, if on the 24th we do give a third reading, then it gets sent off to Islands Trust. But it is quite likely, it is quite possible that it would not come back to Islands Trust until after we had the final meeting of this term. And to ask new council coming in at their first meeting to say, hi guys, how'd you like to support this?
They wouldn't have to do it at the first meeting.
Well, okay.
And
But
There's
I'm just going by history on Owen Island.
there's been lots of situations over the years where it's given third reading, and then there's been all sorts of conditions and stuff to be met in fourth reading. It's happened 6 or 8 months afterwards, well into its next council's term. There's been a whole bunch of situations where it only got third reading.
And that could still happen. If something does come up, if we give this third reading and send it off to Islands Trust, and Daniel comes back with things that make it so that council does not wish to proceed, fourth reading can be deferred to the next council, or it can be turned down by this council. Right? It doesn't have to be proclaimed when it comes back. Yes, Gary?
Well, it's just a little bit frustrating. I guess we pushed this down the road. We kicked it down the road because we split up the public hearing so that we could get all the information back from the workshop, which we got back, which indicated pretty strongly that light industrial probably shouldn't be on that piece of property. So, but unfortunately, we should have handled it earlier on in the council meeting, the regular council meeting, if we were going to discuss it, which we didn't. Because now, of course, we're at the end of the public hearing and we can't change it.
We're back in the regular council
No,
meeting.
we're in the council
Yeah, but we
meeting.
can't change it.
We can do
Well,
anything.
we can do anything we want.
Oh,
But it just depends on certain things. trigger a new public hearing.
Well, that's
because
what I'm
you're
saying,
changing-
that's what I'm just
Right,
saying.
Yeah,
right?
but we
Right.
couldn't have changed it before the public hearing, because you have to give 2 weeks' notice of what you're
Oh,
having a
okay.
public hearing on.
Okay, well, that's clarification. then.
Yeah, that makes no
Yeah, makes
difference.
me, okay.
All right, I'm just checking the honest trust,
If I may.
Yes.
The trouble is, I think many of us, for the best reasons, would like to get some zoning completed. The sticking issue, without doubt, is the light industrial. There is no point in having public hearings if we're not listening. Now, the weight of opinion is overwhelming, verging on crushing. People do not want to see in this lot light industrial. However you shake it, cut it and bake it, that's a fact. So if we keep talking about third readings, we are not dealing with this one fundamental root cause issue that I think we have to address. The great thing about light industrial is that the subject has been raised. I think it has, generally speaking, gained some real acceptance that somewhere on this island we need a light industrial zone. And I don't think that subject was raised before, so if nothing else, this discussion has brought that to the fore. We do need, on Bowen Island, a light industrial zone, and this discussion has raised that. And anyone who was there at the EDC meeting and listening to a presentation made by a representative from Early made a very forceful and very compelling argument for a proper light industrial zone situated in an area that we could agree on. If we go back through this whole history of this bylaw and our public hearing, there's a trail of opinions from A to Z. I had the greatest trouble, especially given the booklet just presented here, on setting that aside. I find that very, very difficult. Now, the other realistic issue is that it's all very well for me to say, okay, let's set that aside. The difficulty is, and I understand this, it means, I think this is a problem in the system a little bit, but unfortunately we then have to go back several steps, which takes a huge amount of time. I don't know how the rest of council are feeling, but I would have said if it wasn't for light industrial, the zoning of this would not be particularly contentious and simply go ahead and probably to a round of applause and we could get on and deal with the issues that the mayor has mentioned of selling this and doing the right thing. But we do have the issue. And it's not an issue by 51% as opposed to 49. It's an issue by a huge majority, because if you care to go and count up all the comments, well, not that that's a particularly great exercise in and of itself, but you'll find the overwhelming opinion is light industrial in an area this close to the cove is something that we've had feedback that the people would rather not see. So if we ignore it, or set it aside, or don't allow for it, then I go back to my comment. Why do we have public hearings if we're not listening? So that's our dilemma, and I find it very, very difficult not to pay attention to what seem profound and sensible arguments raised. Not flippant comments, but people who took a lot of time, care and energy to make very good points by way of argument. And that is something we have to resolve. Now, the schedule, I don't know whether we can do this. And if we can't, how terrible is it to actually say, okay, sadly, we have to go back to get this issue resolved, move it forward, and then the next council, certainly not on its first, second, or maybe even third meeting, could take this, knowing the public support was there, and finalise the work we've started. I think it's a slippery slope when we don't pay attention to what we're told.
If I can just say something. The light industrial conjures up images, right? But it is everything from a guy making kayaks to somebody doing fine woodworking. And we have all kinds of other things on that property that could be as well. So for anybody to do anything, they're going to come before council cap in hand and they're going to say, this is the project that I would like to do on that. This is my business plan, this is how I'm proposing it be subdivided, this is how I'm proposing it be leased, this is how I'm, you know. And council of the day will look at it and say, you know, we really don't want a water bottling plant there. So, sorry, we've decided as the owner of the property, right, and looking after the community interest, we won't approve that. So it's not that we're giving, you see, the difference here is normally you're giving the rights to a third party. And once you give the rights to a third party to do as they will on that land, you've shut the door, you've done it. Whereas the difference here is nobody's done anything, right? It all comes down to council again. So like I said, this is a very small incremental step of starting a process that will take years before anybody figures out how to physically put a building on there that satisfies the trail requirements and the sight lines and all of that sort of thing that will obviously come into play. But what, as you pointed out, it really brings to the fore the need on Bowen for some place for contractors to have shops, for somebody setting up a small business to have the potential to do it. We show a need, and somebody in the private land comes up with something. Everybody on council would cheer and say, "You got it, right? You're out of the way. You're off in the woods somewhere. You can put the park there."
Conversely, though, it's going to be in the zoning bylaws that you can have a work and live place there, and somebody potentially could go in there and you could buy 5 lots.
You can't, because you have to buy it from the municipality. The municipality still has absolute, total, 100% control of what happens on that land.
Well, then why do we have any zoning bylaw?
Because we give the power to other people. The problem we have here is we've owned this land for a dozen years, and because nobody could figure out how a municipality rezones land for itself, nothing's ever happened. And if we fail to do it this time, another 4 years will go around before a council starts to tackle it again, or more, right? I mean, this council after council after council has come down to the end of their term,